to the regular council meeting here at the Shaw Auditorium for April 28, 2014. We'll start off by calling this regular meeting of council to order and ask Mr. Ferrero, do you have any late items, please?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, we're going to add delegation for Mr. Jennifer Davidson on item 8A. Again, Jennifer Davidson, item 8A.
Okay, and it's just a single change on the agenda then?
That's correct.
Okay. So with that, I'll ask for a motion to adopt the agenda as amended. So moved. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And next, a motion to adopt the minutes as circulated. So moved. Moved. Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. So we start right into presentations number 5, and the very first presentation is from our City of Nanaimo Poet Laureate and Ms. Naomi Beth Wakin, and I do have some notes. Sorry? Would you have him 5 minutes in the penalty box? We would like to just make a few comments here. This is as a result of the Mayor of Regina, Mayor Michael Forget, who challenged his fellow mayors in communities across Canada to have a local poet read a poem at the opening of their council meeting celebrating Canada's National Poetry Month. The purpose is to celebrate poetry, writing, small presses, and the contribution of poets and all writers to cultural life and vitality in our communities. And with that, I'd like to introduce Naomi Beth Wakin, the Nanaimo's inaugural Poet Laureate for that matter, to help us respond to that mayor's challenge by reading for us. You're on. Welcome.
Thank you. Your Worship and fellow councillors, I'm delighted that you've taken up the Mayor of Regina's challenge to have a poet read to you during Poetry Month, April, and in recognition of World Poetry Day, March 21st. Well, better late than never. Here's a few poems, and they're going to be about poetry and about the poet's life, just to clue you in a little. The first one is brief. It's why I write poetry. One does not write because the goldfish are playing at the bottom of the waterfall, but because everyone cannot see them. I'd like to start by telling you the reason I think poetry is useful. The uses for poetry. Who has not at times of distress sighed, groaned, cried, and let out an anguished why? And at such times, who has not written why down 100 times and followed with a plea of some kind to make the trouble go away? And as the distress takes form on paper, who has not added an urgent call for help? In this way, poems are made. And when the first robin returns and the first green shoots pierce through the earth, who has not at such times sung out with optimism that all will be well with the earth someday, and that lovers will find each other, and that neighborhoods will flourish? At such times, who doesn't jot down a line to record pleasure at cool, clear mornings and radiant sunsets? And perhaps a word or two is added to the page that this day might possibly turn out better than others. And so we find that in our joy, a poem has been born. Yes, at such bitter and such sweet times, poetry has its uses, I find. The trouble with poets is there seems to be such a big gap between the great poetry they write and the wretched lives they live. Here's a bit of advice to you about poets. Poets on the whole. I don't recommend befriending a poet. They are, on the whole, unpleasant people. They live life to excess and can break you open with a few well-chosen words, not to mention what is in the space between the lines. Worse still, they can stab you with an invisible stiletto should you dare to interrupt them while they are reading in public. And while I'm doling out advice, here's a warning to poets, lest they be corrupted by public adoration. It's called Do Not Write Poems. Do not write poems of brilliant clarity, else they will enable you to dine with kings and mix with members of the government. Soon the mafia will be surrounding and protecting you, and the paparazzi will encounter you at breakfast, and you will never be able to write a poem of brilliant clarity again. I do wish people wouldn't treat me as some kind of oddity. Here's a poem about being an older poet. It's called On Reading Poetry at 80. I read poetry at 79, and the world went ho-hum, as it does for readings of most poetry. The next day I'm 80, and people are suddenly agog at my words. Imagine, they say, writing that and she's 80. It's amazing what one day counts. It's as if I'm a 9-day wonder, a performing dog standing on its hind legs smoking a pipe, or a 3-year-old in cowboy boots belting out a Patsy Cline number. I feel the patting of hands on my head and wonder to myself, whatever will they say when I'm reading my poetry at 90? People constantly ask me where I get my ideas from, and I would like to have said, as did Leonard Cohen, if I knew where the good songs came from, I would go there more often. But I didn't say that, and so here's my record of how I process the news in order to get a poem. And it's a record of one day of me taking in news and the poem I write at the end. It's called Processing the News. She sat in her half-acre and received news on the radio that a never-before-played trio by UNESCO had been found. And on TV, she heard that a dictator was about to overturn another dictator and send his evil empire packing, whose evil empire was not quite clear, and so the reverse seemed as plausible to her. Her email commanded her to sign petitions to stop the dictators doing whatever they were doing, to rally against bullying in schools, prevent clitoridectomy in Africa, protest the treatment of women everywhere, and a threat that if she didn't sign a good luck letter, she would be cursed with bad luck. Later, her neighbor brought her news of a woman bitten by her friend's dog, and another woman by a stranger's dog, that is, all in the same week and on the same little bad dog island. Her neighbors also told her of some poor folks who got an inheritance and bought waterfront, and some rich folks who lost a packet on some deal and had to move from waterfront to some dirt track in the interior. And oh, she said to some of this news, and ah, she said to the rest. In the evening, the book she was reading informed her that 96% of the universe, her universe, was made up of unknown stuff, and that 10 parts of her body could now be replaced at a certain price, and that she could be cloned in the very near future if she would wish to be, which she didn't, already having a twin and finding that strange enough. And as she lay in bed at night, listening to JR Country, she learned she should be sticking to the true values of flag waving and of small towns where the skyscrapers are silos. As she fell asleep, she let the input of the day swirl any way it might in her head. News of the sex trade workers in Africa, and of AIDS there too, and of a starlet who'd been married 3 times and was barely 20, and of anti-ballistic missiles. In the morning, she got up, and reaching for her silk-covered journal, she wrote, "Snow still here, in the half-opened white crocus, a sleeping bee." And that's it for the Mayor's Challenge this year.
Thank you very much. Well, all I can say is Regina doesn't have a chance. Thank you very much. Okay, the next presentation is the Duke of Edinburgh Bronze Award to Mrs. Victoria Welty. And let me get my pieces together here. And then I'll ask Ms. Welty to come forward, and using my Jim Dandy handheld mic here. Ms. Welty? So it says now that that Ms. Welty obtained her bronze qualification by completing over 50 hours of community volunteer service, 50 hours of sport and fitness, and an adventure journey at CFB Meter in the Noose for survival skills. And for her skills requirements, she plays the piano as well as the trumpet. These are twice the requirements to qualify for bronze. So congratulations, and I have this little form here. Do you want to say a few words?
I'd just like to say it's a great privilege to receive this from you, sir.
Well, thank you very much. It's very kind indeed. And let me quickly spin around. Get rid of that. And this is the citation. Victoria Welty has achieved the Bronze Standard, the Duke of Edinburgh Award, April 2014. It had to come from Great Britain, so it was a little bit behind schedule. So congratulations. You know, I would just like to say that I've always been impressed by the programs that are out there for the youth. Certainly in the military, and 205 Squadron has had some terrific leadership over the years, and it has turned out a number of very, very capable and responsible individuals. And certainly, I think the Wilkie family has at least 3 on the go at this point now, and one of them, I believe, is taking flight training back east. So it's made a huge impact for their family, and they should be very proud of their children. Thank you very much. Now, the next one is Ms. Charlotte Davis, the Manager of Sanitation, Recycling and Public Works Administration, to provide an update regarding implementation of the Multi-Material BC's new expanded residential recycling service. Wow. So, welcome. You're going to take it from there, are you? You're on.
Mayor Ratan, if I
Sorry, you're on.
Mayor Ratan, if I could just introduce Mayor and Council
Please.
to Charlotte. Charlotte moved here to Nanaimo in January, and she was hired with the city in April because of Gary Franson's retirement. Charlotte has an environmental background, including a graduate degree in sustainability. She has experience with recycling and sanitation programs in the UK, and I'll leave it to Charlotte to provide a presentation.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you very much. And thank you for your introduction, Tom. So good evening. I'm here to give the update on the new expanded recycling scheme that's coming to Nanaimo. And it's coming really soon. So with that in mind, the scope of tonight's presentation is going to feature the main changes that our residents are going to see. I'm going to cover a brief timeline of how we've got here with MMBC and the changes that will entail for our residents, the changes at the depots we have here in the city, and then the changes for ourselves here at the city as well. A bit of history. BC has always been a leader of product stewardship. Extended producer responsibility programs for items such as oil and batteries date back for over 40 years. But these programs have never expanded to printed paper and packaging, or PPP. Until now, residents, through their user rates, were responsible for the cost of recycling these items. So now we're shifting into a world where we're moving the responsibility from the resident and onto the producer. This change was brought on through a change in the BC recycling regulation, and then the subsequent creation of Multi-Material BC, which is BC's stewardship organisation. As you know, the city signed on in November 2013, and we're now gearing up our residents to receive this increased service. So where we're going, it's quite exciting. We go live on May the 19th. It's good news for our residents because they will be able to recycle more at the curb at less cost. As I understand, the list of items that will be taken on at the curbside will also grow as the programme develops, and I believe that MMBC is the doorway to recycling for multifamily dwellings as well. So residents will notice very modest change in service at the curbside. All materials will be picked up in one container with no need to separate newspapers anymore. Everything goes in your yellow bag. Additional materials will be added to the service, and these will include Tetra Paks and gable-top containers, plastic and paper drink cups, plant pots and seedling trays, plastic clamshells for things like baked goods, and also aerosol cans and their caps. Film plastics, such as things like grocery bags, will no longer be taken at the curbside. The garbage portion of the user fee has been reduced by $35 per annum, which has been prorated this year as we're starting halfway through. As a result, the user rate for the garbage portion is $110, and next year it will be $94. This is down from $125 in 2013. MMBC incorporates depots into their programme as well, and there's 4 depots that are part of the MMBC scheme in Nanaimo. These are the Nanaimo Recycling Exchange, Alpine Disposal and Recycling, and the 2 regional recycling depots that we have here in the city. And these will be taking PPP materials that are not accepted at the curbside. So you're looking at your plastic bags and overwrap being things that would cover newspapers or flyers, that kind of thing. Styrofoam, things from like meat trays, and also glass containers. We ask that we encourage our residents to use these facilities wherever possible, but if they're unable to recycle these things, they are able to put them in the garbage. There are no changes operationally at the city. Things are business as normal for us, although I am busy with an education programme at the moment. So our residents will have received last week their Wasteline newsletter, which outlines what can and can't be taken at the curbside. And also, in conjunction with the Regional District of Nanaimo, we've created the new website, which is www.recycling2014.ca, which outlines the implications for MMBC in our area. So that's the end of my presentation, short and hopefully sweet. Let me know if you have any questions.
Okay, I'm looking at the board, and we have one from Councillor McKay.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. Thank you. And it was nice to meet you on Friday, by the way. I've got some real concerns about this whole MMBC rollout. A couple of things are, who is going to bear the cost of penalties for contamination?
Yes, that's a very good question, Councillor, Your Worship. And just to address that, the city is responsible for any fines for contamination. However, I really think that we're a long way away from there yet. Nanaimo is one of the best cities for low contamination rates, and also there's an extensive scheme that has to go in place first before they can impose any fines. So when the city signed on to this in November 2013, they were aware of this and made comfortable by staff at the time. And it's definitely something that I'm going to work hard to do in terms of my education programme to reduce this ever coming along.
So would you say then that, I'm sorry, Your Worship, would you say then that, that we're correct in around the 1% to 2% mark? Because I'm hearing municipalities around BC saying it's more like 7%, and that we've seen cases in Nanaimo as high as 14%.
So 1% to 2% contamination?
Correct.
In our MMBC contract, it's at 3%. At the moment, I believe we are above that. However, it's not something that is going to be an issue at the moment because of this education programme, but also mainly the steps that MMBC would have to take to impose a fine on us. It's not something they're going to want to do this early in the programme, and I don't think it's something they're going to want to do at all. They're going to be helping us not to go through this and not to incur those fines.
Supplemental?
I really want to kind of focus on what the implications would be for our residents tonight.
Sure, no, appreciate that.
I'm very concerned about also about the $200 a ton levy on newspaper at the source, which is 47 times what they're this recycling program is charging in Ontario. 47 times. And I'm real fearful of the health of our newspapers and whether they'll survive that.
Your Worship,
Yeah, sorry, if I can, let's remember that Ms. Davis is employed
Yes,
by the
sir.
city, and she's
Yes.
one of us. So
Yes.
she's not MMBC.
I understand
And so
that.
some of these ones, they're political questions, which may be difficult for her to answer, that's all. But go ahead, I agree with your points.
So if you are liaising directly with MMBC, how would you suggest that we go about raising our concerns on that issue?
Yes, go ahead.
Councillor McKay with that. I think the best mechanism for us to do that is really to talk with MMBC and also the province, who is the regulator. And I believe there is discussion right now between MMBC, the newspaper industry, and the province, and so that's where the discussion needs to be. I also want to backtrack on that 3% question about the contamination. The one positive thing about Nanaimo is that we do not accept glass in our recycling right now. Many communities do. With MMBC, they don't accept glass, so that we don't have to worry about that being contamination. And in fact, there is many more products that go into the yellow bag, so we can see people add more things, and it's not contamination. It is actually recycling products. So I think we'll be in good shape.
Thank you.
Good. Councillor Kipp.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. More questions that I'd like to have answered by staff from MMBC. Where do the non-registered people, the companies in Nanaimo, I know we have about 8 or 9 companies that do recycling in Nanaimo now. If they're not registered with MMBC, what do they do?
they would continue business as usual.
And will we know where their residual stuff flows to?
We would have to speak with them about that.
Oh, okay. And a follow-up one, another one too is, my big concern with MMBC is, of course, the companies that are controlling it. And it's got nothing to do with our staff or anything, but it really does, it's Procter & Gamble, it's Unilever, it's Walmart. Of course, they're the biggest producers of our garbage, some of them. But that's it's a funny one for me because their board of directors are board of directors for this nonprofit agency. I don't know, personally, I mean, I'm not supposed to join any organizations now because I may be called in a point of conflict of interest. But yet, board of director members from a massive corporation can run a nonprofit organization in British Columbia. And that's a concern to me, especially when British Columbia is way ahead of some of our garbage reducing and recycling. So I hope staff can get some of those questions answered for us. And if they need some more, I can write some of them down. Because like I say, I'm concerned with how this corporation is being run. And we attended a workshop on Friday, the Coastal Waste Management Workshop, and difference in pricing in BC and Ontario is phenomenal. Like we're paying a lot more for the same product pickup.
Okay. Your Worship, if I could perhaps address Councillor Kipp's concerns another time.
Sure. Oh, yeah, no, this is not. Yeah, this is more questions for future. But thank you very much for your work. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Sure, I might just mention, and this really is more of an observation than a question to you, that we did have arranged a meeting, actually it was a teleconference meeting with MMBC and the province, and it was going to be attended by the two daily newspapers, the two newspapers in Nanaimo, the Bulletin and the Free Press, and Daily News, rather, and the Bulletin. And they, for whatever reason, the province at the 11th hour canceled the meeting. But there is a concern, and I think Councillor McKay actually touched on it, that there's a very, very high cost, something like, is it 20 or $200? A ton, and I think the concern that was expressed to me by the two newspapers is that in Ontario, allegedly, they're able to issue time or print time on it and give accreditation to MMBC and others in lieu of payment.
Yes.
Here, they're required to make payment only. So they're trying to find a level playing field. That's the only observation I want to make.
Your Worship, I spoke with the Managing Director of MMBC on that point. I can't speak for him right now, and I believe that the newspapers did go to him with an in-kind option, which was turned down, but not wholly. So perhaps I believe that there is dialogue to be opened again regarding some kind of portioning of in-kind and payment.
Yeah, the MMBC representative came to the RDN,
Yes.
and we had a chance to ask questions, and at that point, he did say that he was going to hopefully encourage the newspapers to contact them directly, and they felt there'd be some accommodation that would be available without
Yes,
an
I'm hopeful for
explanation.
that in the early stages of this programme.
Okay, we've got a couple more questions. We have Councillor Brennan and Councillor Anderson. Councillor Anderson first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome to the city. I just have a couple of questions. The first one is in regards to the reduction in user rates.
Right.
Would you be able to tell me what the reduction is from our previous arrangement?
Yes, the reduction is $35.
$35. Okay, thank you. And the second one was in regards to the separation of materials. So going forward, our residents won't have to go through the yellow bag that you've shown and actually separate out materials. They can just put all of that out on the curb now.
Thank you for those questions. Yes, no, residents will be recycling using the one container, which is the yellow bag. There's no need to put everything to separate out newspapers anymore, so all your recyclables will be placed in the yellow bag.
Okay, thank you. And just one last question. There was a comment regarding increased cost to newspapers, and I just wanted to ask whether or not the increased cost to newspapers would be put on to our residents through this agreement.
Put on to our residents.
As in, would this be passed on through the MMBC agreement on to our residents?
No.
Okay, well, thank you. That's helpful to know, because there has been a lot of concern around the table, and I know from residents our community. But seeing that there's going to be a reduction for the user rate and also the separation, I think is something that is beneficial for our residents to know. So thank you very much for your presentation.
Just a quick question, and then we have Councillor Brennan next, and that is, you may have given, and maybe I missed, when is the implementation date for the new yellow bags?
The yellow bags are already in existence.
Okay, I haven't seen them before.
It's May the 19th is when the programme goes live, so that's from that date you will be able to include those additional items.
Okay.
And from that date we're asking our residents not to include the grocery bags.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for your presentation, and like Councillor Anderson, welcome to Nanaimo. Hope you like it as much as we do. I just don't have a question for you, but I do have a comment in terms of cost to the public. There is a reduction in the garbage fees for every household. And I guess if residents are concerned about the additional costs to them when they're consuming, that's the point, I guess, where people start to say, I'm going to compare these two products. This product has got a lot of extra packaging, and I'm sure I'm paying more for that. So I'm going to start choosing products that have less packaging. And I think that's actually the beauty of the program, is that it falls upon the producer of the packaging to pay the way, and the consumer then has a method of putting some pressure on production to start lessening the amount of packaging that has to be disposed of. So it places the cost on the producer, not on the consumer. And that's a good news story.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, I agree completely.
Thank you. Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Ms. Davis, very much. I have a question about collection.
Right.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but I am going to put everything in a yellow bag that I, up till now, have separated into a yellow and a blue one.
Yes.
All right. How often will those yellow bags be collected? Once every 2 weeks?
They will be collected bi-weekly, yes.
Bi-weekly. That poses a problem for me in that I love the Daily News so much. I buy lots of copies. And at the end of a week, I have 2 blue bags.
Right.
And then my usual recycling stuff. That's not going to fit in one yellow bag. How many yellow bags am I allowed?
I'm pleased to inform you you can have as many as you like.
That's all I want to know. Thank you very much.
Well done. Councillor Johnstone.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Pachi asked my question. I was just concerned about the blue boxes, because you see a great number of them on the curbside. And so they'll be redundant now? People won't use them at all?
Well, no, people, there will be an area of switchover. We're not going to not take something if it's contained in a blue box, but we are asking everybody to use the one container from now on. And also, you are welcome to come to Public Works or any of the other places where we have the yellow bags for collection.
Good. Thank you, Ms. Davis.
Councillor Kipp.
This is more through the senior staff. There's a reduction here. We're not getting much different service. We're doing a little bit less. Instead of my blue bag, I'm throwing it all in the yellow bag, but nothing else is different. But all of a sudden, they're doing it for $34 a person cheaper. We should have been doing this earlier, the $34 off. So I like saving money. So one thing I want to get straight here, because I heard when we were at the meeting the other day, a person used the word recycle. And they were actually talking about glass, which we're not collecting. But they said, oh, well, we recycle glass here. Well, is it recycling or collecting? Because when I hear the word recycle, I want to make sure that that's going somewhere ethical, socially responsible, financially responsible, environmentally responsible, and culturally responsible, because we've valued ourselves for 25 to 30 years with Nanaimo Recycling Exchange and that. So I want to reduce, too. I don't like Councillor Padgett going, wahoo, when I can put out 2 yellow bags. I should be reducing how much we put to the curb, because it still has to go away. And I want to know where away is. So when our garbage hits the curb, where is it going? So I want to know about flow, sort of flow management, or flow transparency, so we can walk in to any of our garbage places and go, where does that product go? And that person opens up his book and says, we sell this to this company and this is where it goes. I'd like to see that in our community, so we actually can say and be proud of our recycling and know nothing's going to India, our computers aren't ending up there, little kids burning up mercury-laden products. So I hope we can get that and understand where it goes. So thank you.
Okay, I see no further questions. And before you leave, I just want to check and see, Mr. Hickey, is there anything you wanted to add? Or are you happy with the world as it turns?
We're just looking forward to May 19th and get it started.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
So we can put our blue bag now in yellow bag?
Thank you very much, Ms. Davis. Appreciate that. Okay, we're moving now into corporate services, which is item number 8, rezoning application RA 330 at 2875 Departure Bay Road. The purpose is to present a rezoning application for the property located at that site, 2875 Departure Bay Road, in order to permit a site-specific liquor retail store. We have 2 delegations. They have up to 10 minutes each. The first delegation is Ms. Rebecca Harden, Rising Tide Consultants. Ms. Harden? Welcome.
Allowing us to speak. I'm going to be brief. I know this is just our first and second hearing, and we still have our public input process. Hopefully we will see ourselves there. The first slide that's up, it's kind of pale here, so I've also given you some handouts at your stations as well. You can see clearly this is what it looks like right now. And we're proposing to relocate a liquor store that's currently on Dumont Street, and we're proposing to put it here in Departure Bay, on Departure Bay Road. And just to give you a little bit of what we're proposing it will look like, we're trying to make the area look a bit better than it currently does. We were proposing to put this liquor store here and be visibly distinct from the 7-Eleven that's currently on site as part of the liquor regulations. And we think we've done that here with this proposal. So we're trying to play off the blue off the ocean. It's directly located across from that, and we just wanted to make sure they were 2 visibly distinct buildings, even though they're joined and have that shared wall. The second point I am looking to touch upon tonight is I got the report on Friday, and in attachment D, the Departure Bay Neighborhood Association there's been a letter provided by them, and I just wanted to give a little bit information to talk to that poll that's been done specifically. And that poll was actually sent out the week prior to our Kinhut meeting that we hosted on February 5th. So we took it upon ourselves to place an ad in a newspaper, go online, let residents know that we were hosting basically an informal session to discuss and address any concerns that local residents had at the urging of our last committee meeting. So we went ahead and held that on February 5th. And this poll is actually something that was done prior to that. And I think the date is somewhere around January 28th that it was sent out. So in there, on page 34, it addresses specifically the hours of operation, the litter, a lot of concerns that the local residents had. And during our Kinhut meeting, we made a point, we spent actually 2.5 hours with individuals that showed up and went over all of those points with them. So we feel that we had addressed a lot of those concerns that that poll was representing. And based on that meeting that we held at the Kinhut, we found that approximately, after the end of it, around 70% of the attendees were in support of the liquor store. We thought we were really positive in the contributions that we were able to give to them to support the relocation. The other items that we also received since that meeting and just prior to it, we've actually had an additional 14 letters of support from local residents and whatnot for the area. John's actually received them personally to support the liquor store. We think it's going to be a viable business. We're trying to do something a little different, make it a little bit high-end establishment, beautify the area, draw residents in. Hopefully that's what residents want. We're assuming they're going to vote with their wallets anyway and keep us in business and become a viable liquor store. So that is hopefully short and sweet.
Okay, I don't see any questions at this point, so thank you very much for your
Great.
presentation.
Well, thank you so much.
Now, the next delegation we have is Ms. Jennifer Davidson. Ms. Davidson, welcome. You also have up to 10 minutes.
I'm shorter than Rebecca. Okay. Good evening. Yes, I'm Jennifer Davidson. I live at 2730 Elk Street in Departure Bay, and I'm here on behalf of the Departure Bay Neighbourhood Association. We weren't originally planning to talk tonight because we had submitted the results of our survey, which I know you have in your packages. And just to address what Rebecca said, she's not quite there. We did send out the survey prior to the meeting that Mr. Wicks held in the Kinhut, and we deliberately had the due date for the returns 2 days after the Kinhut meeting so that people could take advantage of going to the meeting and listening to the information provided by Rising Tide and Mr. Wicks. So, and also, just to clarify too, the ad they put in was a very small little personal ad. We actually sent out flyers. We poked through doors in the neighborhood to advertise the meeting, and we sent out to all of our members as well. So we did quite a bit of advertising for the meeting and made it really clear that we wanted everybody to come out, whether they were for or against. So just quickly, you've got the results of the survey. I don't need to belabor that. The thing that we found most interesting, it was, of course, more people were opposed than were in favor of a liquor store, which we'd like you to keep in mind when you do your voting tonight. And what was interesting as the results came in was that whether the people who were answering were for or against, there were some very specific things that came out in both responses. And it was an open-ended question. We just simply said, do you have any concerns or questions? And overwhelmingly, there was a lot of stuff about the hours of operation, which we understand will be covered by the bylaw that was put in place in the late 90s. Drinking at the beach was a big concern. The impact on surrounding parks, traffic, parking, noise, litter, and you have the information. The reason we come tonight is a couple of things that have come up since are that the letter from the RCMP, which you also, I believe, have in your package, actually states many of the same concerns that people in our neighborhood stated, although they didn't oppose the application. But we see in the letter from Mr. Wicks that he does not see that there will be any of those problems. In fact, he says the liquor store will not impact negatively on any of the surrounding recreational facilities, parks, public venues, which is sort of at variance to what the neighborhood is saying and what the RCMP is saying. So we have actually suggested to staff the idea of perhaps some sort of good neighbor agreement. That was also suggested by the Social Planning Advisory Committee, and if you decide to vote in favor of the liquor store, we certainly would like to see some sort of agreement in place. We did draft up something, a very rough idea based on something that's usually used for liquor establishments where you stay in to drink. That's not cast in stone. We're giving some ideas out. And Mr. Wicks himself did state at the public meeting that he would be prepared to meet with the neighbourhood representatives on a regular basis, so I'm quite certain we wouldn't find any pushback from him. We'd like something formal rather than us approaching Mr. Wicks and just saying, hey, how about getting together twice a year? And the reason for that is quite simply because businesses don't remain in the hands of the same people, and the concerns don't go away if somebody sells the liquor store to somebody else, and we'd like it to be in place for that premise rather than with that particular person. We were a bit disappointed to see that in staff's report to you guys, there was no mention of any kind of agreement, even though we had suggested it. And just simply that some of the issues that we have concerns with aren't things that we've sort of conjured up in our fertile imaginations. Many of you know, unless you're new to Nanaimo, that there is a history, there has been a history of problems at the beach. We did have a huge issue with underage drinking with parties, and even one very memorable evening with a riot that took place at the beach area. And the residents of Departure Bay have worked hard to try and get rid of that. The bylaw that the previous council passed has gone a long way, putting a curfew on the beach area at night. So we really don't want to have steps going back. We'd like to have steps going forward. So really, that's all I have to say. In sum, I just want you to remember to consider when making a decision this evening that a majority of residents polled are opposed to the liquor store, that concerns are raised by both the neighbourhood and the RCMP, and that should the application be approved regardless of the above, then we would urge you to consider some sort of agreement between ourselves and whoever is operating the liquor store into the future. So I think that's really all I have to say. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there a question for the delegation?
Yes, I do.
Oh, yeah, before you go, ma'am.
Thank you for your presentation. And I understand your concern, and everybody has reason to be concerned when, anything like this comes along. I'm going to be asking further along in the meeting that we ask the RCMP to give us some experiential information relative at the public hearing, relative to other parks that we have that are in a similar situation as yourself. What I wanted to ask you was, you state in your brief that that the majority of the people who answered your poll were opposed. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I've been reviewing the neighborhood plan, Departure Bay neighborhood plan. Mm-hmm. So if I see correctly in here, in 2006 there were 1,564 dwelling units in Departure Bay. That's about right. And your association covers the entire area within the plan?
We do. Not all of those 1,000 homes are members, but we do cover that area, yes.
I understand that.
Yeah.
So would you have any comment on the ratio of 20, if 49 people answered and 54% were against, that would equate to about 25 people? Would you not suggest
I think the numbers are in, I'm sorry, I don't have the survey in front of me.
No, just the percentages are in there.
Yeah, I mean, I think I put down, I think it was about 120 went out, and the response rate was about 20%, which I understand is quite good for a survey.
Sure.
And I can't remember sorry, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I'm pretty certain it's in your packages, isn't it? The exact numbers of how many came back. My understanding is, it's a long time ago since I went to university, but that you can extrapolate from even a smaller response, you can extrapolate. I guess, we tried to get to, we don't have the resources to do a Canada Post type mail out. We did run around and try to go 2 or 3 blocks back, putting things through doors, and we sent out to about 100 and some odd of our members.
Okay, so my question to you then is, would you not consider that 25 out of 1,564 dwelling units is rather small?
Yes, it is. It's a small sample. Yeah, we didn't hide the numbers.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, Councillor Greaves.
Thank you, Worship. Now, this drinking and carrying on the beach, that was before the liquor store was there, right?
Yes, that was prior to, I'm just trying to think, about late 1990s, 98, somewhere in there, something like that.
And I'm wondering, so there's drinking on the beach. Is it automatically going to be surmised that that alcohol is coming from that liquor store that's proposed?
Not necessarily, but I think that for many of us who lived through that particular time, that we're just concerned that with liquor being sold that close to the beach, we're concerned that there could be a reprisal of the situation. And so that's why there's a few issues that we had suggested might want to be addressed.
Oh, okay, thank you.
I might just ask a quick question. We have other questions as well. You are suggesting that you're not that concerned, or you don't have any concerns with the present operator that's coming? Is that my understanding, or am I misquoting?
I have no reason to suppose Mr. Wicks is any better or any worse than anybody else.
No, probably not. The point I want to make, though, is Mr. Wicks, has operated the Black Bear Pub for many, many years. So it's not like some new consortia coming into town without any knowledge of the industry or knowledge of the area. So I think he has sent a letter, as you're aware, and that he wishes to be very responsible in the operation of the thing. And at the end of this, after the motion is made, I think Councillor Patchy may want to bring something forward as well. So we'll see where that all unfolds. Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Ms. Davidson. Thank you for doing that sort of groundwork. I think it's important for us to have as much information as we can from the beginning to the end of the process. So I do appreciate the work you've done, and I do appreciate the information you've given us. And I guess if this issue is sent to public hearing, we'll hear more, but certainly this sets a good framework for us to move on. So thank you for gathering that information, and it's good to have the perception.
Part of the reason we did that is because we didn't feel there was anything in our neighborhood plan that really addressed this specific situation.
No, I know that there's a desire for more commercial, but the neighborhood association is saying we want to be cautious with this kind of commercial. I get that. Yeah.
Sure, understandably. I don't see any further questions. Thank you, Ms. Davidson. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Now, there's a staff recommendation, the motion that council direct staff to secure the community contribution and road dedication reserve fund prior to the adoption of the bylaw 4500.064 should council support the bylaw at the third reading. So I think at this point, would somebody like to move and second and continue discussion? This is on 1, yes. Sorry, I should have pointed that out. Nobody? No, it's been moved and seconded, I think. And we're just looking for discussion on this one, if there is none. We'll just call for all those in favor then.
Your Worship?
Yeah. You want to make a motion?
No, I've got my...
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you just put it on now?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I looked at it 2 or 3 times and it wasn't there. Sorry, go ahead. Councillor McKay.
I'm hoping to get an explanation on the, get a little bit of information on the $79,000 surety that's being requested. To staff.
Sorry. I'm sorry. Mr. Lindsay, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just in response, some background in terms of the process we do with rezoning applications. Through a rezoning application, we look at the frontage roads in front of a property, and if it's identified that the road classification requires dedication from the property for the ultimate build-out, we'll often make that a condition of rezoning. So in that way, over the years, we've been able to obtain pieces of road right-of-way all over the city without any cost to the citizens. And then when the road becomes built, we're allowed to build it in that right-of-way without having to negotiate or purchase new lands. So in this case, it was identified through this process that there was a need for a road dedication along Departure Bay Road to allow for widening of the road. We've sent that information to the applicants. We would normally at this point be looking for road dedication, or preferably where there is already improvements on the property, we'd be looking for what we call a road reserve covenant. So it's just a covenant that gets put on the property, and it would say in there that in the future, if the city needs this land for $1, they would provide it to the city and we'd be able to build the road. Both of those options were found to be undesirable to the property owner, and as such, the applicant themselves came back with this proposal of providing basically a cash in lieu of the dedication, proposing that the city would hold this fund of just over $79,000, and when the day came that we would need those lands, we could actually purchase the property with those funds.
Supplemental? Yeah. So then that would just assume that we would want that based on the report for a widening of the road.
That is correct, Your Worship, yes.
Okay, so then, you know, I spent some time out there on Saturday, and I noticed that across the street, on the side street, just immediately across the other side of the street, is very sacred Snuneymuxw land, of which is their burial site, and it's been that way for 3,500 years. Then on the other side of the property, there is another sacred Snuneymuxw site. So have we had any conversations with them, or would we ever contemplate that they would ever give up either of their frontages to widen the road? Therefore, are we proposing that if we should ever want to widen the road, that we would jut it in and then jut it back out again, and then on the next piece of property jut it back in again, and then you run into the apartment building where you have to jut it back out again?
Mr. Lindsay?
Thank you, Your Worship. That's a good question. I think I'm not a traffic engineer, but the way I would answer that is this is a corner property, and what's been identified is a tapering from Bay Street as we move south to the properties that you're referring about. So it's an opportunity for widening at the corner primarily, as I understand it, and the taper could be reduced down through the design so that it doesn't impact those neighboring lands. The detailed design would still need to be done by the engineers, though, before we could be certain of that.
So, Your Worship, so I would suggest that we would, if we're going to intend to widen out Departure Bay Road, that based on the restrictions of adjoining properties and the apartment building further down the road, that we're going to have to abandon that idea. The piece that we're looking for is not on Bay Street, it's on Departure Bay. And having said that, we've also got the fact that that property was more than likely developed under development permit, and there's landscaping that's there. That landscaping would have to move further into the property because it would have to be replaced, one would suggest. And we've said in our report that there's only just enough parking spaces to accommodate the two businesses there now. They'll probably lose 8 or 10 of those, so will now be substandard to the parking that we require. So I can't see the point of even considering that piece when it's highly unlikely we'll ever get the adjoining pieces, and it would destroy the current development permit and it would reduce the parking.
Certainly, Your Worship, certainly there's a number of things which Councillor McKay has identified here, which is correct. There's a number of constraints down there on the property. When I was talking about Bay Street, I'm sorry, I was talking about moving from the corner of Bay Street along the property frontage on Departure Bay Road. We were looking for a taper in there. With respect to a situation like this where there is improvements on the property, in this case there's landscaping and parking stalls, as you mentioned, that would be impacted by a dedication, we would recommend what's called as a road reservation covenant. So it would actually get registered on the property. The property would continue to be the current property owners. It would only be executed at a time that the city required that road dedication for construction. So it could be next year, it could be 5 years, could be 10 years from now. The point of having the road reservation covenant is that it would not have to be any expenditures of public money to buy those lands at that time.
Or we could expropriate them.
Well, yeah, but I don't know if we want to get to the, I think that's beyond what our scope is for tonight at least, but that potential's always there, yeah.
I would like to put a motion for it if you would.
Okay.
Indulge me.
Certainly.
Your Worship?
Yep.
There is a motion,
there is a motion on the floor, which we'll have to deal with first.
Yeah.
Amendment.
If you want to amend the motion, that will be the proper.
Certainly. Amend the motion that Council direct staff to secure the community contribution prior to the adoption of bylaw 4500.064 should Council support the bylaw at third reading.
Moving second. So let's go into discussion on the amendment now that Councillor Anderson, did you have anything you wanted to?
Well, I'll speak to it. I won't support the amendment. Within our draft transportation master plan on page 177, within the long-term plan, it talks about the Departure Bay beach corridor improvements, and it says that this project would seek to improve conditions for all road users along the Departure Bay beachfront, including pedestrian cyclist vehicles accessing the beach, while supporting future access to Hammond Bay via Departure Bay. And so if we're going through this process, I think Mr. Lindsay clearly laid out that this is something that we could potentially be waiting 1, 5, 10 years for. And so I think it would be going against what is already within our draft plan. So I won't be supporting it. And that's all I have to say.
Okay. Councillor Graves on the amendment?
Yes, Your Worship. I think essentially what we're doing then is hamstringing the proponent with this amendment. I've got to tell you that I don't see the extreme importance in this. You know, we're talking about a rezoning, and all of a sudden now we're talking about a road dedication. I think we're mixing the two up. Mr. Lindsay has explained the situation, and I think this is a red herring, and I think we're getting sidelined as to what we're doing here. So I won't be supporting the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Your Worship. I won't support the amendment either. I think that that the motion as it is with the road dedication in there is reasonable. The explanation from our staff is that once it's executed, that there won't be any public funds used to secure that road dedication. And expropriation is not an alternative answer, because expropriation is costly, and in my view, it's much better to have an agreement with the owner than to have to sort of heavy-handedly expropriate. And the cost of expropriation rises considerably if there's an unwilling property owner. And I just don't see the point in us going through that. This is reasonable. I appreciate the staff's report, and I'm going to support the staff's report and not support the amendment.
Okay, and for my part, I'm not going to support the amendment as well. And I know the concerns that were raised about the sacred ground belonging to First Nation, the Shinimo people. And I can assure everyone that, I mean, the city would not arbitrarily do anything that would in any way inflame or enrage or upset or anger the First Nations, and there's no intent certainly on my part, and I think all of council's, to do anything that would interfere with their sacred land. And I think it's a little bit awkward to even suggest that might happen. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a few comments relative to the application, and when I think of the amendment as it relates to being heavy-handed, in fact, so here we have the property owner, 7-Eleven, who is unwilling to come forward with what the request of the city is for this 2.3 to 4.8 meters. And on page 25 at the top, it indicates by acquiring road dedication through rezoning, the city is able to achieve the required road right-of-way needed to accommodate improvements suggested within the city's road classification standards, without the need to purchase the required dedication. So we're now asking a potential tenant to come up with $80,000 plus a $10,000 community contribution that the city will use to buy that 2.3 to 4.8 from 7-Eleven at some future date. And we don't know what these road improvements are. Accommodate improvements suggested. We don't know when that will take place. So we're asking of a small business owner that wishes to enter into an agreement to become a tenant to upgrade and improve that site to come up with just shy of 100 grand to put in a bank account somewhere that we're going to hold when we're going to decide what it is that we're going to do down there. We heard about narrowing, widening, narrowing. It's like putting a sidewalk in the middle of somewhere and it leads to two ends of a sidewalk that's one lot wide and there's no sidewalks on the other sides of it. So, and in fact, with the 2 lanes down there, I kind of find it to be quite comforting to know that the speed of vehicles hopefully should not increase if we widen it going either direction, north or south. Clearly there's a fast lane and clearly there's a slow lane. I kind of like it the way it is, to be quite honest. I'm hoping that the site will be improved. I'm hoping that the venue will be improved. So when I think of heavy-handedness, I think this is heavy-handed to tell somebody, if you want to go in there as a tenant, you're going to have to come up with $90,000 because we might do some road improvements. And I heard Bay Street, and then I heard Departure Bay. Well, which one is it? So I'm kind of confused here. 4.5 meters of 2.3 to 4.5? We can't even draw the line what those road improvements are because we don't know what they are. So when is that going to happen? When are we going to figure out what the road improvements are? And is it a combined Departure Bay Road and Bay Street, or is it something other than that? And my last point, Your Worship, this is a rezoning. And I realize that this is an amendment that we're talking about right now. The current zoning is CC2, Neighborhood Center. The proposed zoning is CC2. So what we're talking about is a text amendment to an included use on that site. We don't have to rezone this site. We have to make a text amendment for this permitted use. So I don't get where this triggers the opportunity for us for an expropriation to say, well, we want X from you. Well, we're not rezoning anything. It's a text amendment to add a retail use that currently doesn't sit in bylaw as a permitted use. So I don't know how we can rezone something from CC2 to CC2. Thank you.
Councillor Johnstone.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Bestrick has expressed my concern because realizing that the 7-Eleven has a different ownership than the leasee, the new addition, I was concerned about how we could direct the new tenant to put money aside for future road improvement in front of the 7-Eleven. I understand how you are talking about, Mr. Dale, about bringing curving it in, tapering it off of Bay Street onto Departure Bay Road, but it really doesn't improve the frontage of the new leased liquor store. So it was confusing for me, and I appreciate Councillor Bestrick speaking to it.
Councillor Kip.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think this, by removing the road dedication reserve, we're still getting the contribution. We're just not sticking it into road reserve. We're going to get the contribution. And like the 10,000 in there, the extra part is to be used in the park. So my thought on removing this, it takes care of this. The road dedication is not wanted by 7-Eleven. They don't want no part of it. It's going to be a long time coming. So this is saying it has to sit in the road dedication reserve. And I've always had problems with some of these reserves that they get money stuck in them and they're supposed to be for some higher purpose like trails for bikes or pedestrians, but they get put into just road building. So I like the idea of taking road dedication out of that from my perspective. So I will vote in favor of securing the community contribution and removing the road dedication.
Okay, Councillor McKay.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a final question on the CC2 zoning. Can staff tell me what the type of business could go into this location without a text amendment as a lessee?
Your Worship, there could be a very wide variety of uses on that property. From memory, it would include retail, all forms of retail, office, restaurant use. The issue here is that when the city did the liquor strategy a number of years ago, we identified liquor stores or licensed retail stores, as they were called, as a specific use and pulled them out of all of those zones. And the policy required that each applicant come forward with a rezoning application. So there's been, over the last 10 years, probably 8 or 10 applications that have made their way through council specifically because of that. So this is just the latest in a string of applications for licensed retail stores.
So supplemental, so if it was a bakery, or if it was a shoe store, or if it was a bookstore, any one of those items would not require this process and would not be, and the owner or the lessee would not be required to come up with $80,000 for this purpose.
That's correct. Almost the retail of almost any other item would not require a rezoning. That's correct.
So I just want to extend that just one bit further. I'm having trouble with this licensed retail nomenclature. The government seems to use the term licensee retail store. So is that a term of ours, or is it an extension of that?
I'm sorry, Your Worship. I'm probably mispronouncing or misquoted the province's term there. I think you're correct. It's licensee.
Our reports all say licensed, and yet the province referred to it, and the RCMP referred to it as licensee.
I would, Your Worship, sorry, I'd have to check with the province, with their literature to confirm. I've always stated it as licensed retail store, but we're talking about one and the same here. It's essentially a liquor store in association with a liquor primary use is what it is.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship. I'll be supporting the amendment because, well, for two reasons. I'm really having trouble visualizing expansion of that part of Departure Bay Road. I know how difficult it has been just up from Departure Bay, up Hammond Bay Road, as far as Friar Tuck, where, we had grand ideas for a suicide left turn into Friar Tuck, which could not come about because there's just no room to build. And as far as the corner of Bay and Departure Bay is concerned, I can see that there possibly might be some advantage to widen a small portion of that, but I'm really unsure about that. I also want you to know that the Departure Bay Neighborhood Association went through a lot of trouble for a long time to get the suggested 30K speed limit in that part of the bowl. And I don't think any of us in that area would be in favor of making improvements, in spite of what the traffic master plan may say, that would have people speed up on that particular section. It just is of no appetite to me whatsoever. So I'll be supporting the amendment.
Okay, Councillor Graves.
Thank you, Worship. 3 quick questions or statements. Now, this would not be a deal breaker, so that's that. Through to staff, Your Worship, this is a relatively common thing to do?
I would say, Your Worship, that on the vast majority of our rezoning applications, we obtain some form of road dedication. It would vary in size from maybe 1 meter up to 4 meters. Normally, the property owner is willing to provide that dedication as a condition of rezoning, or provide us with a covenant, a road reserve covenant that we could obtain in the future for little or no cost. Because the owner was unwilling to do this, this proposal that's before you this evening was the applicant's proposal in response to that, because they were not able to get the road dedication from the landowner, or they would not agree to that dedication.
Thanks for that. And I know what the vote's going to be, so I'm not going to belabor this. But before we have the vote, I'd like the amendment read out, if you don't mind,
Yes.
so I can understand it clearly.
Yeah, I think, Councillor McKay, can we not get it? Let's hear the amendment, please.
Yes, Your Worship. The amendment is to remove the words "and road dedication reserve fund" from the staff recommendation.
All right, so on the amendment, all those in favor? Opposed? We have 1, 2, 3, 4 opposed, 5. So those opposed would be Councillor Anderson's opposed, Mayor Rattan, Councillor Greaves, and Councillor Brennan. The balance of council in favor, so the amendment passes. And now on the main motion.
Your Worship, since the amendment has passed, council may now bring the motion again with the amendment.
Yeah, that's what I was just about to do. So on the motion now that has been amended.
Does it read?
Sorry? All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Greaves opposed, Councillor Anderson opposed, balance of council in favor. Motion passes. Okay, and now we'll call on Councillor Patchy. I believe you had a motion you wanted to make?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I have an addition to 8A, which I'd like to read first. Make the motion. If I have a second, I'd like to speak to it. And
without hearing it? Okay.
Fair enough. And the motion reads that prior to the adoption of bylaw 4000.064, a protocol be established between the business operator and the neighborhood association to allow for communications between the parties and a process to address issues that may arise from the operation of the business, and that staff be directed to provide a draft protocol template for use by the business and neighborhood representatives. And I so move.
Seconded again.
Moved and seconded.
Okay.
And I don't know if there's any discussion. You're going to speak to your motion, but my question is, Mr. Ferrero, do you have a copy of that already?
Yes, Your Worship.
So we don't need to get it read slowly. Councillor Patchy.
So, Your Worship, I am one of the original members of the Departure Bay Neighborhood Association. I've lived in the area for a long time, and I think I have a pretty good handle on what the feeling is. And I think it's 50, and I think it was roughly 50-50, if I read it correctly. And to me, that means that there's still, whether it's 20 or 40, it doesn't make a difference. There is a number of people that have a concern with it. Now, I know that the association asked for a good neighbor agreement. We have those, but we only have them in effect for liquor establishments for people actually sit and drink, and we don't have it for liquor outlets. And so I agree with staff that it's not good to force all liquor outlets to have a good neighbor agreement, but I think this one at Departure Bay is slightly different. Departure Bay is not only important to the people that live there, but it's the property and it's being used by all sorts of people from our municipality. We've had troubles in the past that Mrs. Davidson alluded to, and I think if we can come up with a site-specific solution, which this motion is asking for, then I think we will have alleviated the worries of most of the people that expressed those worries, and so that's the reason for doing that.
Good point. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. I see no further discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving into the bylaw itself. Motion that zoning amendment bylaw 2014 number 4500.064 RA 330 to permit a site-specific use at 2875 Departure Bay Road as a liquor store pass first reading. Moved and seconded. I see no discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And
Zoning amendment bylaw 2014 4500.064 second reading.
seconded.
Amendments included.
Yeah. Well, it would be automatically amended. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We're going into development variance permit DVP 229 at 102 Dines Place. The purpose to obtain council authorization to vary the lot frontage and lot depth provisions of the zoning bylaw to permit a 4-lot subdivision. And it's requested that council or anyone wishing to speak with respect to this DVP 229. Is there anyone in attendance that'd like to speak to matters related to DVP 229? Are you wanting to speak to it, sir? Come forward. We just need your name and address and whether you're for or against it, sir.
My name is Irv Duke from lot number 4 at Green Lake on Dines Road. Mr. Mayor, I have a copy of what I want to say. I'll go through it as quickly as I can, and there's other people's here that want to talk after me, so bear with me. And it's very hard to hear some of your mics. Anyway, variance permit number 00229. Bylaw regulations regarding the parcel at 102 Dines Place, Lot 5 is zoned single-family residential -R1. Lots number 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 7 signed a paper that's right here that I'm going to give to the mayor. We are against this variance because it doesn't meet the requirements without bending or altering the rules. This is for single-family dwellings. Regarding Lot 4 and Lot 6, we bought into Section 8 Wellington District Plan 21559 as single-family dwelling lots in 1973. Now, there is a Schedule A which says that this is registered in Section 8 under Plan 21559. That I don't want to read the whole thing because it's too long, but the bottom line is I, Jack Dunbar, being the registered mortgagee and so on, registered as number 35 something, hereby consent to the building schemes. At that time, Your Honor, no building, fence, wall, sidewalk, steps, awnings, tent, pole, or structure shall be erected, altered, or maintained upon any part of the said property unless the plans, therefore showing the construction, goes on and on and on. I'm going to give you a copy of this to read yourself because it's not really, it's just the idea that we moved there and this is a rural residential area that's single-family dwellings. Okay, now, Lot 5 has been a challenge. That's the one we're talking about. And I have a reference letter to Mr. D. Murray, the health inspector, in 1977. And the problem there, it's changed slightly, but it still continues. As owner of lots 4 and 6, I'm concerned about the Lot 5 and the runoff. For this reason, I feel it necessary to note the following comments. Lot 4 and 6 have been well established for several years with the occupants using wells, septic tanks, and drain fields as indicated on the enclosed map. I understand that Lot 5 did not pass the percolation test, which is required to obtain a permit from the health inspection unit. Fill has been used to provide drainage. However, I don't feel that this will adequately absorb the discharge. Well, about 25 years later, it still hasn't absorbed the discharge, and they took away the sewer drainage part because we now had, thanks to Mr. Bestwick and the good people on council, that got us something to protect the lake from being polluted. So we got our sewers after 32 years. Now, I still have runoff from Lot 5. We still have runoff water from Lot 5 onto Lot 4 and 6 at the property corner. The proposed variance creates many problems. By changing Lot 5 into 4 parcels, Lot A, B, C, and D, there will be only more congestion if a 4-lot subdivision is allowed to proceed. There will be no off-road parking available as lots are too congested. We already have several near accidents and perhaps a child on a bike or walking at Jenkins and Dines Place as cars regularly cut the right angle corner to speed around. This is traffic going in and out. The high density approach will damage privacy and our rural concepts. I've already said Lot 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 7 have advised that they are not in favor of this permit to create high density. What about the height restrictions? If they did build something there, there used to be height restrictions which concerned Lot 2, and he can't be here tonight. But when I finish, Lot 1, Lot 6, and Lot 7 want to speak right after me to this, so I'll make it as quick as I can. For some reason, the City of Nanaimo does not plow the snow on Jenkins Road from near the lake access road all the way to the ends of Dines Place within a quick, reasonable time. It takes many days to complete. In the winter, with much snow, the road is a hazard. By increasing the density of 4 new lots, there will be more traffic. The values of Lot 1 to 7 will diminish in value and privacy. Lot 5 did have a mobile home for the late parents of the current owners. That was Jim and Irma. which did not create a problem as they were already elderly and did not drive a car. But they lived in a mobile home on that property. And at one point, probably 30 years ago, Mel in Lot 7 and myself had to give a written permission for them to be able to have that trailer on that lot so that their parents could live on the lot. We didn't have any problem with that, and it's worked well for many, many years. But this idea of having 4 very tiny parcels on that one lot, it just doesn't make sense. Should consideration in the future for a different application, perhaps 2 parcels of land could be considered. The 5 things that should be looked at is off-road parking, the water runoff onto other lots, the height restrictions of the buildings, the sewer connections, and the setbacks for monster houses or 2plexes or 4plexes or whatever. This is offered to assist council, and I think I would like to turn it over to Lot 1, Kathy, and her husband, Chris, and let them try to help you also.
Okay, just for clarification on the number of delegations and the length of time to speak.
Your Worship, I'm not aware of the number of delegations sitting on the audience right now, but normally we will allow 10 minutes, but it's a council discretion to make that 5 if you see that it goes over the 4.
Okay, thank you, sir. Just leave it with the staff and they'll distribute it there, sir. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Kathy Fife, and I live at 134 Dines Place. We bought our piece of property 2.5 years ago, and we thought long and hard where we wanted to live, and we wanted to live in a rural area, which we found at the end of you go through a subdivision, and then you get a farm on your left, and big lots as you come to a little cul-de-sac, nice and quiet, and we are on the lake, and we went, this is perfectly for our spot. We do find, we're amazed how many cars do the turnaround, how much traffic we already get on our road. People go, well, I didn't realize it didn't go through, number one, so we get a lot of traffic turning around. So once this corner property, which is right now only single family, if they allow the 4 that they're asking for, that is probably, in all reality, at least 8 more cars that have to be parked, and if they have any guests, family, whatever, you're asking for quite a few more cars on this little corner lot, which, again, I've almost had a few head-on collisions because it is a very sharp turn going into this cul-de-sac, and just with that much more traffic being parked on the sides, I watch the recycling trucks and any fire trucks and stuff that come down there, and if there's anyone parked all around there, they're doing like a 10-point turn to even turn around in this cul-de-sac. And so allowing that many more people on this corner lot, I think is, and also coming down Jenkins, where it's a subdivision, there are always cars parked along the road, because I guess they have guests, and you're waiting for cars to pass along Jenkins going towards the Black Bear Pub. So there's always limited space for driving along that road already, and that's what we're anticipating is people parking on our cul-de-sac turnaround. The only other one is there's a lot of people that, because of the small, the nice farm area, we have a lot of people that walk their dogs, and they're always walking along that road. And so it is, usually it's elderly with their little dogs and stuff, and so just increased traffic is what we're worried about, to allow 4 more in that one corner lot. So that's basically what it is parking issues, and it's a tight corner, and it doesn't fit our rural atmosphere, which are large lots with one single family home on it. That is the whole area. Once you get through your subdivision, it's farms and large lots with one house.
We've got a couple of questions for you,
Sure.
and it's for the delegation. Go ahead. Councillor Brennan.
I understand that you believe 4 is too many. Is there a number that you think would work?
I think 2 would be beautiful, okay. Split that is, I looked at it, I went, it's a fair sized lot, and I think 2 houses there would be perfectly fine.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Patchy.
To staff, if I may. These 4 proposed dwellings on Lot 5 are susceptible to secondary suites?
That's correct, Your Worship. zoning there would allow a secondary suite in each dwelling unit. Yes.
Okay, any further questions for the delegation? Seeing none, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Now, was there anyone else in attendance tonight that would like to speak to matters related to this property?
Thank you, Council, for hearing us. I am the owner of Lot 7.
Okay, we just need your name and address
Oh,
for the...
Kim, that one?
Okay.
6, Lot 6. And I, first of all, have to speak to this, but I also had a question about the councillor's question. There are several different things that are unclear, specifically speaking to the next section. Park and cash in lieu. So there's some things that I'm learning as I go along with this, but for myself and my family with 2 small children, living next door in this very quiet spot, my kids are riding on this road, riding around that corner. We are walking with them, but cars do cut that corner. And it is a very dangerous spot. To have additional traffic will be a very, very large danger for my family. And it will also be quite an infringement on our privacy because that backs onto our backyard. We will now have 4 houses looking into our backyard. So it will reduce all the trees and green area that we have right now, and it will be a large infringement on our privacy. So, and I don't know if we get to speak again when it comes to the subdivision approval, park and cash in lieu. Do we get to speak to that?
Well, certainly you can. That, yeah.
I'm
You get
not-
more than one opportunity, so don't worry about that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So that is what I had to say, but I was just questioning about that. So maybe I'll learn and question again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, anyone else in attendance tonight that'd like to speak to matters related to that property on 102 Dines Place? Welcome, sir. We just need the name, address, and your affiliation.
Bill Wills. My brother and I have owned Lot 7 since the early 1970s, and we have spent considerable amounts of money there at times to subdivide, and we were told wait for sewer, and we waited 40 years. We finally got sewer in. So we're very concerned now about people wanting to subdivide multiple units like that. They're large lots. It was a farm at one time, and these were all, except for that lot that I know of that's wants to be, they want it subdivided into 4 lots, because if you take a drive out there, you'll see they're very large lots. A lot of them are around the floodplain, which of course you can't subdivide, but it's the beauty of the lake and the quietness, and that's what we want to preserve. And we have spent upwards of $40,000 over the years to try to get some help with surveyors and so on, just so my brother and I can legally cut it in half, because we're both owners. So.
Oh, okay.
And I'm not familiar with this note on the further that you had on the park, because I wasn't aware of that. Maybe you could explain that, the park in cash lieu.
Mr. Lindsay, do you want to give us a quick explanation
Thank
on
you.
the park dedication?
Part of the majority of subdivision applications under the Local Government Act, there's the opportunity to take 5% park dedication. Council does have the ability, when that dedication would result in a very small piece of land that's deemed to be maybe inappropriate for a park size, they do have the option to take cash in lieu, and that is the case with this 4-lot subdivision. There's no adjacent park that we would add this land to, so staff are recommending the cash in lieu of actual park dedication.
Okay. Now, is there anyone else in attendance that'd like to speak to matters related to 102 Dines Place?
Evening. My name is Wayne Wills. I'm half owner of Lot 7 out there, and I'm in agreement with the other folks here this evening, with the other landowners, that it's just not suitable for that piece of property there in the corner. It's a low residential neighborhood to begin with. There's a full, I believe it's over 100-acre farm to the left. It's very rural. It's a dead-end road. And to just all of a sudden just spring a 4-lot subdivision in a very corner lot doesn't play out as well. So that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Okay, sir. Oh, Councillor, sorry, just 1 minute, sir. There's Councillor Brennan for the delegation?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
So I'm just going to ask you the same question. Is there a number that you think would be appropriate for subdivision there? I mean, you can say no. You can say no. I think it should, but-
I guess it could split half for 2, I guess. But 3 or 4 is definitely out of the question. Even then, there's an issue of parking there anyways, because it's right on the corner as well. So it's a very narrow road to begin with. And like someone else said here this evening, parking is a concern, especially on a narrow road to begin with, on a dead-end street. With the traffic that comes down there, people love to come down there and just take a look around on the rest, but they get to the end, oh, it's a dead end. So it increases the traffic back again. And it's a very narrow road, and coming out, it's an exactly 90-degree turn, very sharp turn. So, and that's right where that proposed subdivision's at. So,
Interesting. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Now, anyone else? Come on down. Welcome, sir. Just need your name and address or affiliation with this.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Councilman, my name is Jeff King. I am co-applicant for the proposed subdivision at 102 Dines Place. In sitting and listening to the fine folks here speak with regards to the subdivision.
Maybe you just pull the mic towards you a bit, if you would.
Sure.
Yeah, that's great.
Is that better?
Yep.
Okay. After hearing the concerns, I'd like to just make a response to some of them. From what I'm hearing, parking is an issue. The size or the number of lots, and the water runoff. Now, if I may, the size of the property is, we're not changing the zoning. It is zoned single-family residential. The lots do meet the size requirements. We're doing a small variance because if we were to tear down the existing house, we wouldn't need the variance the way it is. We're trying to preserve the character by leaving the existing house and varying the lot width and length so that we can leave that one house there. As far as water runoff, that's addressed in the approval. As far as the road width, the road is already full width. Traffic won't be a concern with parking because each single-family residence will have the appropriate parking as laid out by the requirements under the bylaw. And when it comes to people taking that turn a little sharply and a little quickly, we could put a stop sign. I'm actually surprised there isn't one there because there's a road change and it is a 90-degree turn. So a stop sign on the corner would take care of the traffic. I believe that's it.
Okay, before you go, I think there's a question for the delegation.
Yes, thank you very much.
Councillor Patchy.
You heard my question to staff about secondary suites.
Yes.
Do you intend to have 4 residences with secondary suites?
We are not building the houses. All we're doing is we're creating the lots. Actually, we're looking for the PLA approval. Any developer at that point would decide whoever they sell the lots to, the builder would make that decision, and that would be a permit application to you.
So the chances are that that could happen.
It could.
Okay.
Not guaranteed.
Well,
though.
you know, the reason I'm asking is because that ostensibly can double a whole bunch of things.
Well,
including
again, the parking would have to, you could only do it if you had enough room for the number of cars. So the bylaw would dictate if you could actually put one there or not.
Okay.
So again, we'd still be playing within the rules.
True. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I see no good. Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Now, anyone else tonight that would like to speak to matters related to 102 Dines Place?
Fred Taylor. Am I hearing that this property has a covenant on it, single-family use only?
Mr. Lindsay, are you aware of the covenant?
My comment would be based just on what we heard from an earlier delegate, that there is a statutory building scheme. As Mr. Taylor is aware, the city does not enforce building schemes.
And that's possible, but you know there's case law in Nanaimo I've raised that secondary suites are no in a single-family zone, so I hope the developer's aware of that. I'll pass that information on to the people, because if it states single-family, you can't put a secondary suite in it, and that's been proven. I've proven it.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Councillor McKay, to the delegation or to? Okay. Councillor Brennan, to the delegation or to?
No, it's to staff. I'm just wondering from staff how the number 4 was chosen, simply because it can accommodate it almost? Is that kind of?
Yeah, as my understanding is, it's the applicants have looked at the property, they've looked at the existing zoning and what can be accommodated under existing zoning. And as you heard the applicant say earlier, that there would be an opportunity to tear down that existing home and actually create 4 lots that complied with the bylaw. The preference is to keep that home, and as a result, the minor variances are being requested to lot width and lot depth.
Okay.
All the lots would still meet the minimum lot requirement of the existing zoning, though.
Okay. The other question I have is, oftentimes when we're looking at a question of approving subdivision, we favor those ones that densify because that's one of our goals is to densify. So are there the other things that we like to see or that we hope to see with densification? And I'm speaking particularly in terms of transit. Is there regular transit out there? Do those, is there, can you walk to neighborhood stores? Are those other kinds of values there in the neighborhood that you would want to see the densification accompany?
Sure. Your Worship, I guess my response to that would be the entire area is identified as neighborhood designation under the current OCP, so it talks about infill. The closest services, from my perspective, would probably be Woodgrove Mall, and although there's probably no transit, I think there has been improvements through things like the Parkway Trail to try to facilitate alternate forms of transportation connecting these communities.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Worship. Appreciate the delegations. My question to staff is the road that was identified as being, I'm not sure if it was conforming to normal width. My recollection of and looking at that road right now actually would not suggest to me that that is a normal width of a residential area road. And it doesn't even appear as though that there's the ability to, in fact, make it similar to our conversation we just had about narrowing, widening, narrowing, sure, whatever we're going to do. So for me, it doesn't look like it's a normal width road. Could you please comment on that?
Certainly, Your Worship, Councillor Bestwick is correct. The physical road, as you see it constructed there today, does not meet any of the city's current standards for road. I don't want to speak for the applicant, but I believe what they were saying is there's sufficient right-of-way width there. There's sufficient road right-of-way to allow for the ultimate road classification to be constructed. So through the subdivision, that would trigger the normal frontage works, which could be curb, gutter, sidewalk, repaving to the center line of the road. That road would need to be constructed to the current city standards as part of this subdivision application.
Then is it my understanding that the 1.4 meters and the 0.03 meters on, on 2 lots and 2 lots would allow that to take place in so much as build the road wide enough? Because what I just understood you to say doesn't give me that level of confidence.
I'm sorry, maybe
Well, they're only asking, so the request is for 1.4, or sorry, 1.6, 1.6, 0.0, 0.3, 0.3. So is that in order to, accommodate 4 units plus the existing and provide enough road frontage? Or we don't know that?
No, sorry, I understand what you're saying. No, sorry. No, there's no road dedication that's required in addition here. So the variance that's being proposed is not a result of the required road dedication.
Thanks.
I don't see any other questions at this point, but I am uncomfortable with this, and I just was wondering about what would happen in the event that the request for the variance was denied. Could those 4 lots still be subdivided?
Your Worship, if Council denied this application, the applicant would have to reconsider their options, but I would suggest that one of the options would be to remove the existing home and provide 4 lots that are in compliance with our bylaw. But the options could also vary from doing a subdivision possibly of 3 lots, but it would really be at the applicant's discretion at that point.
Yeah, I guess I'm just having a lot of trouble with the potential of secondary suites there. It's obviously a very narrow, confined way, and the 4 lots with the potential of 4 secondary suites would make a significant impact on the lifestyle of the people in the area. And I know that technically, as a city, it's hard for us to get involved with considering lifestyles and those issues, but in this particular instance, I feel kind of obliged to it, and I think from my part, I'm going to have difficulty supporting the variance. Councillor Greaves.
Thank you, Worship. So all of this is over 1.6 meters. In the old days, that used to be 4 feet. And 0.3 meters, that big, a foot. This is what this is all about.
Yeah.
And this is, we've given variances, and 10 variances at once to various things, to various buildings. And, you know, it's a big lot, and I know I heard that we live in a rural area, but we do live in the city of Nanaimo. And, you know, somebody owns that property and they want to divide it. And if they knock the house down, they're going to get it anyway. So again, I'm in support of this this variance. I just, you know, we put water and sewer in there. We knew full well that people are going to subdivide.
That's right.
We knew that was going to happen, and it was a good deal. And our plan is to densify, and our plan is to have transit, and so on and so on and so on. All the stuff that we talk about, and you know, I feel a little sorry for the people that you know, I've lived there for 30 years or whatever it is, but things change, and we see it all over the place. We just saw it at the corner of Turner Road and Uplands, whether you like it or not. So anyway, that's my little spiel.
Okay. Councillor McKay.
Thank you, Your Worship. On this one here, I wanted to thank a couple of members of our gallery who are council watchers, Mr. Boland and Ms. Kuziak, for posting a multi-part series of a 2008 council meeting, of which Councillor Bestwick and Councillor Brennan were both involved in, where they were struggling with the urban containment boundary. And the city manager of the day was showing what the alternatives of properly developing within your own urban containment boundary. And we were looking at 3 and 4 and 5 acre lots with out in the middle, outside the city boundary, paying for virtually no services. We're providing roads out there, and so on and so forth. 3-car garages, and the cost to get ambulance and fire out to them was excessive. It's a really, really good watch, and I spent considerable time watching it. It's a couple of hours worth of debate. And in Nanaimo, when we compare ourselves with Saanich, for example, we're seeing in Saanich about 14 or 15 people per acre, and in Nanaimo we're running 9. And so this whole densification is coming because we elected to make it come. We're going to be densifying within the inside of our city, and it sure as heck beats the alternative, which is what we witnessed at that meeting in 2008. So I'm in favor of the motion.
Okay, Councillor Kipp.
Thank you. This is one of the tough ones because if you look at the maps, they're right on the border of the regional district. They're at the edge of it. And I totally understand the regional growth strategy to move people and densify into our cities. But for me, the lot split in the residential area, this could be 8 residential units within this, because you can have a 920 square foot secondary suite in these houses. They're big lots. For me, the infill is more aimed at the downtown core where those services exist already. This is a tough one for me. Like I say, when Councillor Brennan asked about the number that would suit it, to me that splitting it in half for now is that split. And it sounds like 20 years from now they could probably split it again. But for now, the 4 lot seems like a lot. Jenkins Road isn't a standard road. It's pretty small there. It is a 90-degree, runs up Dines. I went out there and looked at that. It is a small area. But this doesn't suit the infill idea that I have on infill, where you take a lot downtown and divide it and put some small houses in, like we've had up, say, on the bowl up here. This one's a tough one for me. Putting it, I think it's just too dense, and it is the rural edge of our community. I don't think transit's ever going to go down that road. I really don't. I can't believe transit would ever turn down around that road. So from my perspective, I don't support the 4 lots currently.
Councillor Brennan.
This is difficult because if the proponent doesn't get the 4 lots, then the obvious next step is to tear down the existing house. And dividing into 4 lots would not require council's consent. Is that correct? Would not have to come before council again?
That is correct, Your Worship.
Because there would be no variance?
As long as the lots met the requirements, met the technical requirements, the approving officer would consider the subdivision. That's correct.
So with or without our approval, there could be 4 lots there. And I guess really the question becomes, the bigger question becomes the energy used to tear down the building and the maintenance of the character of the neighborhood. I still don't know how I'm going to vote on this. I think it's just too. I don't have a concern about the secondary suites, but I do have. If it doesn't require our approval, if there's no variance required, and if they tear down the house, there's no variance required. So there, Bob's your uncle, right? I don't know.
Okay, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's a tough one, but I see this different. Dead-end road, dead-end street, narrow street, the potential for legal suites in the most people now, most subdividers are when developers are putting in the mortgage burners, and I really have to go with the current neighborhood and the people that have come before us tonight. It's for me a concern. I don't think it suits it. I can see 2, perhaps 3, but preferably 2. But I guess we just have to take our chances and vote the way our conscience tells us on this one and see what happens in the future.
Okay, Councillor Pachi.
Thank you, Worship. I shall not be voting in favor of this because it is just too dense for me in this particular area with the secondary suite possibility. Now, Councillor Brennan is absolutely correct. that we still may you may still end up with 4 lots, but at least by denying this one at this point, still leaves it open for the applicant to come up with something less. And I think I would like to take advantage of that opportunity. So I shall not be supporting.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson, did you have anything?
Sure.
No, well, I'm not, you're on, you're off, you're back. I was just wondering if
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think my colleagues around the table have illustrated the challenge that we're facing, and it could easily go forward that we don't approve the variances and they tear down a house and the 4 homes go in. The comment about secondary suites, we don't know whether or not secondary suites are going in. It's not in the application, so I don't think that's something that we should be discussing. If the secondary suite would come back to council for that type of decision, or no.
Sorry, Worship. Sorry, Worship. The lots were created, the existing zoning would allow for suites, so there'd be no further council approval required.
And furthermore, into rural areas, I know that in South Nanaimo, around Park Avenue, those were all 5-acre lots. And this council voted to put in 26 homes on a 5-acre lot, and numerous lots. And so neighborhoods are changing, and I remember speaking to one of the owners in that area when this occurred, and they ended up having to move to a different area because it didn't fit into the rural feeling that they wanted. And it's unfortunate when that happens, but it is a difficult decision because either way we could be faced with 4 new homes in the area.
Is there a motion on the floor now? Okay, so we'll have to get that moved. And Councillor Bessick?
You took me off.
Yep, you're on.
Thank you. In fact, we're all talking about not supporting or supporting, and we don't have anything in front of us to debate or discuss in the form of a motion. So I would move that council issue development variance permit DVP 229 at 102 Dines Place in order to permit a 4-lot subdivision by reducing the required lot depths to 28.4 meters, lots A and B, and lot frontages to 14.7 meters, lots C and D.
Seconder? Okay.
I'd like to speak to that, Your Worship.
Sure, go ahead.
I haven't spoke to it yet, other than the comment about the road frontage and a question to staff. I'd just like to encourage my fellow councillor, Bill McKay, to get a life if he spent 2 hours watching 2008. Let me know when you're doing that next. I'll bring the popcorn. If and I don't recall that glorious 2 hours, but it might have been where I said something like, how dense is dense? And every area that we live in this city, despite being all within the city boundaries, they're all unique, and they all have their own special uniqueness why it is attractive to one person or one family or families of generation after generation. And looking at the site, looking at the road, looking at the character, and I'm probably one of the, and I'm glad that we have sewer out there because people did wait a whole many decades to get it. And we did know that that might create opportunities for people to retire because they would be able to have something that was worth more money, and that they could potentially take a 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 acre parcel and cut it in half, and family could live on one. All of that good stuff that we heard when it was necessitated that we actually act on that and get it done. So I'm glad we did that. In this particular case, I won't be supporting this application because of the specificities of its location to put 4 times 2 potential, which we don't know, on that lot. And the lot is large, but it doesn't make sense to me. And so I'll just go back to probably what I said in 08, how dense is dense. And I won't be supporting the motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. The motion's on the floor. So all those in favor? We have Councillor Anderson, Councillor McKay, and Councillor Greaves in favor. Opposed? And opposed we have Councillor Anderson, did you vote? I didn't get you there. Maybe you did.
You said my in favor.
Sorry, and then we have Councillor Pachi, Councillor Johnson, Mayor Tan, Councillor Bestwick, Councillor Kipp, and Councillor Brennan. So the motion fails. And I think in that place, obviously, item C would be redundant, and we'll just pass it by. And moving into item D, Development Variance Permit DVP 230 at 1-1275 Island Highway South. Purpose to obtain council, let me finish it first. To obtain council authorization to proceed with statutory notification. This deals with a sign at A&W Restaurant to do with their rebranding, and I think it's a pretty straightforward thing. Let me turn your speaker on, and then you can move it here.
Required statutory notification for development variance permit number DVP 230 at 1-1275 Island Highway South.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Bestwick. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving into development variance permit DVP 231 at 897 Howard Avenue. Purpose to obtain council's authorization to proceed with statutory notification. The staff recommendation, motion that council direct staff to proceed with the required statutory notification for development variance permit DVP 231 at 897 Howard Avenue.
So moved.
And moved and seconded. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Developments variance permit DVP 232 at 3500 Osprey Lookout. Purpose to obtain council authorization to proceed with a statutory notification. We do have a delegation, Mr. Derek Blackwood. Welcome, sir.
So confused, huh?
Thank you. Good evening, Your Worship and Council. My name is Derek Blackwood, and my wife and I have just purchased our first home at 3500 Osprey Lookout. We found a beautiful house in a gorgeous neighborhood where we look forward to raising our son and walking our dog. The property comes with many great features: terraced rock garden, an existing hot tub, and a large deck in the backyard. Inside, we have very modern appliances, energy-efficient windows, and our wood stove has been replaced under the wood stove change-out program offered by the city. What this has left us with is electric baseboard as the primary heat for the house. Due to the inefficiency and high cost of doing this, we have talked to an Nanaimo company about installing a heat pump on the property. After he surveyed the site, and due to the sloping nature of the yard and existing amenities in the backyard, his recommendation on the most efficient place is in the side yard of the property. I've come towards council and city staff and request to apply for a variance to allow the heat pump in the side yard. I look forward to working with city staff and council, and thank you for your time.
Okay, Mr. Blackwood, just I don't see any other questions, but the one I have you had discussions with the neighbors in the area, and is there any pushback or concern?
I have spoken to the majority of the neighbors around us. I have provided a written letter of our intent. I have also have the written consent of our neighbor on the south side that would be directly affected by it, and I have spoken to them a few times, and they are definitely in agreement and also have a heat pump as well.
Thank you very much. Please, go ahead.
Oh, all right. I move that council direct staff to proceed with the required statutory notification for development variance permit number DVP 232 at 3500 Osprey Lookout.
Moved and seconded. I see no discussion. I didn't. Councillor Greaves.
Can we receive the delegation first of all? Or is it...
Well, did any other questions?
Did you want to just stand there?
It might be some questions on it, and we
Okay.
rush through that.
No,
Okay. So, did you want some for the delegation?
Yes.
Sure.
I think it's, I will withdraw my motion
Okay.
until this happens, so that
I
if there is
assumed there weren't
debate,
any questions, but now that there are some
Well,
questions.
you were very quick. I just wanted to say that it's Mr. Blackwood's lucky day, as far as I'm concerned, because I'm a little tired of enforcing the heat pump bylaw that should go in the backyard. And I've given up on that, and I don't care where they put it. So he can have it in
Well,
the
Mr.
side
Blackwood-
yard, the front yard, anywhere he wants.
Obviously, this is your lucky day.
Okay.
Very much.
So, with that, there's no other speakers on it, and it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? The motion carries. Thank you.
Okay, still didn't receive the delegation.
Development variance permit application process, which is item G, purpose to obtain council approval to modify the development variance permit review process by eliminating the need for the application to appear at 2 council meetings. Staff recommendation, the motion that council direct staff to modify the development variance permit process to use a council posting procedure to notify council of an application. Moved and seconded. No discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? The motion carries. Moving into riparian area setback variance policy review, and it's to be introduced by Mr. Rob Lawrence, environmental planner. Mr. Lawrence, welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for the invite. Yeah, it's just a short backgrounder on the item before you right now on the process review for riparian setback variances, and I'm going to give you a bit of an overview of the history and a little bit of some of the components, the revised process, the tools, and the guidelines that are a part of the report. The initiative began with a council resolution back in December 2012, and that was for the planning department to review the riparian setback variation policy that existed at the time in consultation with the Advisory Committee, Environmental Sustainability, the Development Process Review Committee, the development community, and forward the results of recommendations for change to council for their consideration. As part of a 3-stage process that we initiated it the next month after the council resolution, we began a context and process review looking at the existing legislation, but also provincial and federal legislation for protecting watercourses, and invited a number of stakeholders, committee members, and professional biologists that work with the development community to a workshop in March, where we went through a number of scenarios about what would be some reasonable approaches to take in doing reviewing existing policy and clarifying what is needed to in the first step, minimize the need to do a variance, and when a variance is necessary, what actually would have to occur to minimize any kind of impact. This led later to a report that went to council last summer with 15 recommendations, and this also went through our Environment Committee and Development Process Review Committee. In the fall, we then began a process to implement 11 of those recommendations, which are part of the report you see before you now. At the March workshop, there was 3 key conclusions that came from the public consultation. One focusing on scope. The protection of watercourse habitat values needs to look beyond fish protection. One of the main comments that came that there were many environmental features within our existing watercourse setbacks and marine foreshore areas that are not simply fish-centric or focused, and they need to be considered as part of maybe a wider wildlife corridor within the existing setbacks. On the issue of process, protecting the city's watercourses can be accomplished at the time of subdivision and through a more robust development process. There's a number of things we can add to our current process that can add more checks for staff to review with an applicant that can minimize any potential impact of a variance when it's necessary, and potentially to avoid a variance as well. The other component was education and communication. The city clearly has a larger role to play in improving the public's awareness of our riparian and aquatic ecosystems, but also the work to improve the habitat, both by community groups, but also by many developers that are part of the development process that do restoration work as part of an application. So, as I said, in this particular stage, this is a review of and an update of the existing policy we have for our development permit area guidelines for watercourses and our development permit area guidelines for environmentally sensitive areas. What we have done, though, is include a new section for development approval information, which gives much more detailed requirements up front at an early stage for what would be expected if a developer wanted to apply for a variance within a setback area. We've also looked at developing a revised setback variance process for staff that applicants can use. This is just a quick rundown of the steps typical of a process now, except a pre-application meeting is all going to be asked And this is an opportunity to sit down with the applicant at a very early stage with the appropriate consultants, including a professional biologist and city staff, and go through upfront what the expected legal requirements, legislative requirements for doing a potential variance, but also looking for opportunities to avoid the variance in the first place, looking at setback adjustments, building footprint adjustments, going through that process at an early stage to minimize cost and confusion later on down in the process. Once a DP application is submitted, as in the current development permit area, a qualified environmental professional is asked to do a detailed assessment report to comply with the riparian area regulation. We are going to ask also for that biologist to do an executive summary of that report, but also any other reports that we ask in simple language that can clearly state what was the impact, what has been the mitigation, and that a no net loss has been achieved as a result of the work that's being done by the developer to minimize any impact within the setback area. The last point I'd like to add is at the bottom, at the conclusion of a development permit being applied, the biologist is being asked to return at the construction and post-construction stage to make sure the recommendations that they have asked for in their reports are being applied on the ground. This is actually something that's been required in the riparian area regulation, but has been failed to be implemented in many communities. But this is something I think we have an opportunity to correct here. So in summary, applicants will meet with city staff earlier during a pre-application stage with this change. Opportunities and alternatives to avoid a watercourse variance will be reviewed at that point. A broader site assessment will be required as part of a variance application beyond what's being asked for simple fish habitat requirements through provincial and federal legislation. Improved development permit area guidelines will be provided with more detailed information up front of what is expected through development approval information, but also within the new guidelines. And the qualified environmental professional will be asked to confirm that their recommendations in the original report are being implemented on the ground at later stages in development. So that concludes that presentation.
Very good. Thank you very much. Very interesting information. We've got a couple of questions. Councillor Patchy.
Do we have a motion on the floor?
That I think, would you like to move that? Or Councillor Brennan, go ahead.
One, and development permit area DPA number 2, environmentally sensitive areas, and direct staff to implement the revised development permit process for watercourse variances.
Okay, moved, seconded.
Can speak to that.
Councillor, do you want to speak to it now?
I would like to, yeah.
Yep.
The reason I would like to is because we spent well over a year now working on this. I think that the goals of council when the motion was made was that council wanted to be able to have more confidence in the reports that came before us. There was a concern that there wasn't really an arm's length, and so there was a need to have more confidence. Council also wanted a process that would value all the wildlife and not just the fishery. Once this went to the Advisory Committee on Environmental Sustainability, the committee had the same goals, and they had those goals for some time. After workshopping it and hours of meetings, and several of the members on our committee would spend hours at home poring over the reports and the suggestions, detailing down to specific meanings of each word, and we spent a lot of time. An awful lot of work went into this, and we wanted to ensure at the committee level, we wanted to ensure, just as Rob said, that there was no net loss of habitat at the end of development. There would be no net loss. And that was in response to several community members who came before our committee and said, this is a big concern to us. We're very happy with this. My committee, several of us went to the, what do you guys call yourselves? The that's it, the Development Process Review Committee. And we were impressed with the committee and the way that they took this seriously, and the real lack of disagreement. And I think that what we saw was that the development community is as interested in habitat as the environmental committee is, and so we were quite impressed by that and heartened by it. So I just want to thank all of the committee members on ACES, and in particular I want to thank Rob Lawrence, our environmental planner, who sat with us and worked through each and every paragraph, sometimes each and every sentence and word, to determine how this would be interpreted. So thank you to everybody, and I'm really proud of this piece of work. I think if it passes tonight, we can all be really proud of this piece of work.
Well, and thank you, Councillor Brennan, and your committee too, because it was a huge amount of work, there's no question. And I think the outcome justified all the work that went into it. It sounds like a very positive result on it. Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Richard. Well, all of it has really been said, other than to I reminded myself the other day that when the first workshop happened in March of last year, I sat in on that for a day or two, whatever length it was. And then I kind of lost track until a month ago when I was able to sit in on the last ACES meeting where the committee went over the language with a fine-tooth comb. And I remember thinking then, in March of last year, I figured it was going to take you 2 years to do it. And here you are. And the expertise that I noticed, particularly on the last meeting, was just mind-boggling. It was good, to the point. You know, we all know that, we've talked earlier tonight about infill and densification, and with that comes, extra pressures on our rivers and our streams and our watercourses. And so there are many good things in this new document that will give us a much better handle and a much better tool to deal with that. I'm particularly pleased with the pre-application setup. That is really an important step in the right direction. The educational aspect is perfect. And, a lot of time was spent making sure that everybody understands that we're talking a lot more than just fish-bearing streams. All the vegetation, all the leaf setbacks that are connected with that are just as important. So Councillor Brennan has thanked everybody involved. I will thank Councillor Brennan for having brought this to conclusion. Thank you very much.
Okay, well said. Councillor Beswick.
Thank you, Bishop. Well, since we're all in a congratulatory mood, I'd just like to say that there are two committees working simultaneous on bringing back, through staff's engagement and the greater community and stakeholders at large, did work many months on bringing forward something that we all agreed on, actually, without even knowing as much information that was going on in each other's camps. So when something like that happens, it's really meaningful, actually. And this is where we really get the opportunity to make a statement about how we would like to see and vision what takes place in the future. I'd like to compliment staff on bringing this forward. 21st century, this type of work moving forward in our community is so important. As far as I'm concerned, I wish it was sooner than later. Now it's an opportunity for us to protect and preserve responsibly and humanely in what we're doing, and not just about fish-bearing streams. And so I'm really encouraged by this. I'm really anxious to see this take traction now as we move forward with this. And I too would like to compliment the Development Process Review Committee and its members and colleagues, Jim Kipp and Bill McKay and others, in our mayor and Diane, who joined us for some of our meetings. So I think it was a great exercise, and perhaps at the end of the day, it might be one of the most important things that we've done. So I wish to compliment everybody involved. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So the motion is on the floor, and that is 1 and 2 combined. So no further discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Now, I just wondered if I can maybe get council to indulge me, and I just wanted to ask to Mr. Farrow, is it appropriate now, can we ask it with the council's approval, of course, to see if we could bring forward the accommodation tax at this point? I think the presentation will be relatively brief, and because we've still got to slug through the financial aspect, which will be quite time-consuming, and I'm just wondering, in the interest of time, and for Mr. Brady and Mr. Angus, who waited patiently, is that...
Do we need a motion?
Well, that's what I was going to ask.
You don't need a motion. You can just bring it forward if everyone is in unanimous consent. Yeah.
Yeah, bring
Oh,
it forward.
okay, well, sorry?
There was some people here willing to speak for the next issue, so you're going to delay that.
Well, I don't think, yes, but I mean, who are you going to delay? Because otherwise, we've got a long presentation to bear through, and we don't want them to weaken at this point. So, gentlemen, if you'd like to, maybe I'll just start up by saying the purpose is to provide council with background information on the accommodation tax application process and introduce a bylaw to permit a 2% tax for overnight guest accommodation in accordance with the provisions of the Provincial Sales Tax Act. And we have two gentlemen in the delegation, Mr. Dan Brady, the chair of the Nanaimo Hospitality Association on my right, and Mr. Sasha Angus, the CEO of the Nanaimo Economic Development Corporation on my left. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. And thank you for moving us up on the agenda. We were very happy. So my name is Dan Brady, and like you mentioned, Your Worship, I'm the chair of the Nanaimo Hospitality Association. The Nanaimo Hospitality Association is a not-for-profit society incorporated in BC. It's made up of all the accommodators in town, hotels, motels, a couple of campgrounds that do have cabins like Westwood Lake Campground. We've been working for 7 years now, I guess, Ian keeps reminding me, on an accommodation tax, and we're finally at the point now where we have documentation in front of you, and we're hoping that you tonight will pass the bylaw that will allow us to go to the next step, which is to go to the province with the application.
Okay, thanks, Mr.
Do you want to add any?
I would just echo our support for Dan Brady, who has been a large part of this process for the past 7 years, and we're looking forward to, hopefully, to having a new resource to continue to diversify and to build our tourism community here. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, gentlemen.
Any questions?
I don't see any now that, Councillor Pester.
Not a question, Your Worship, but certainly a compliment, because as long as I've been sitting here, this has been a work in progress and something that I think we're the only community of our size or in the entire province that doesn't have this hotel tax. And it's absolutely imperative and critical in the work that's been done and the continuity of having the same. I'm sure you have your master's or doctorate in hotel tax in the accommodation sector by now. And I would just like to compliment all those that were involved to getting it to the stage where it's at. Thanks.
It's been quite a collaborative effort, and it's been back and forth quite a few times. It's been on the table and off the table. Probably off the table more than it's been on, but happily we're here today, so thank you.
That's great. Councillor Johnston.
And I was just going to reiterate what Councillor Bestrick said. I believe it's been closer to 20 years, Dan, and you've been a part of that a good number of those years as the past director of tourism Nanaimo and past chair of tourism Nanaimo, and I'm going back. It's been on the table for a long time, and thank you for your perseverance.
Yeah,
It's well done.
point. You're welcome. It's only now that Tourism Nanaimo and the NEDC, and we've got a whole bunch of ducks in a row, and we'd always said that once the tourism strategy was done and that we could identify where the gaps were, that we would, as an industry, would come forward with the tax at that time to fill those gaps, and that's why we're doing it at this time, so thank you.
Okay, we've got two more, Councillor Brennan, and let me get you off there, and Councillor McKay. Councillor Brennan?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to congratulate you, Mr. Brady, for achieving collective consent, and I know how difficult that has been. So it was no easy task, and I take my hat off to you. Hard work. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. It's, we only needed to have a bare majority of 51%, and we're coming forward with just a hair under 80% in favor. So we have a very strong mandate.
Councillor McKay.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Brady. You and I talked at a little bit of length recently about this process. Can you enlighten so that others, other than just myself, understand that there are some restrictions put on this collection of tax by the province? Can you enlarge on some of those restrictions?
Well, I think what you're referring to is in terms of what you can do with the money and what the intent of the tax monies are. And the way the provincial legislation is written is that the new tax money can't replace existing tax money or city support for, excuse me, for tourism initiatives. So the business plan that we were coming in front of you with right now is a 5-year plan. So for the next 5 years, council is, I don't want to say you're locked in because that's probably not the right word, but you're committed to supporting tourism funding in the city for the amount that sort of flows through to the NEDC right now. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I think that's it. I just want to thank you both as well, and thank you, Dan, because I know you've been instrumental and carried the ball for so many years on this. It's nice to be there now. So,
well, thank you.
Thanks
Thanks
very
again
much.
for moving us up in the agenda.
Okay, good. So now, the staff recommendation is a motion that council authorize the mayor and the corporate officer to execute agreement between the city and the Nanaimo Hospitality Association should council adopt the bylaw number 7189. And then there's the bylaw. Motion on that is moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And then into the bylaw itself. Does anyone want to? Thank you.
The accommodation tax request bylaw 2014 number 7189 to permit a 2% tax for overnight guest accommodation in accordance with the provisions in the Provincial Sales Tax Act pass first reading.
Second, no discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And
that accommodation tax request bylaw 2014 number 7189 pass second reading.
Second, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
And that accommodation tax request bylaw 2014 number 7189 pass third reading.
Second, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So that's it. Thank you, gentlemen. We'll now revert back to our regular schedule, and my apologies to anyone who had to wait, but I thought it might be we could get through that part of it fairly quickly. And so we're going back now into unresolved building deficiencies, and that's notice on title, section 5.7. It's requested the council hear anyone wishing to speak with respect to unresolved building deficiencies for the properties listed below. Staff recommendation of the motion that council instruct the corporate officer to file a bylaw contravention notice respecting the properties listed below with the Land Title and Survey Authority of British Columbia under section 5.7 of the Community Charter. The first property is 714 Bruce Avenue. Construction completed without a permit. Is there anyone in attendance tonight that would like to speak to matters related to 714 Bruce Avenue? Come forward, sir.
My name is Miles Parsons, and I'm the owner of 714 Bruce Avenue, my wife, Claudette. I received this notice today. I booked to sit down for dinner, and I get a letter from council that was drafted on the 16th of April, mailed on the 22nd, and I received it on the 28th to be here tonight to answer this. I wish the city was that quick in answering other calls I put out. On this agenda here, it said that construction completed without a permit. The construction has never been completed. When I got the stop work order on it, I did just that. I stopped working on it. I went down to City Hall. I was away for a first week, and I went down to City Hall, not City Hall, down to the annex where the building inspector is. And I went through and I said, well, I want to do this right. I was repairing my front step because it's an old concrete one, and I happened to put a cedar deck on there, and I wanted to repair it and make it better, safer, better mostly. And I said, I want to do it right. So he said, well, you got to put up the plans or bring them down here to us, and we'll approve them or go to council or whatever they got to do.
Can you tell us roughly when that was?
That was about almost a year ago. Okay. Actually, it was probably June, I think it was, or July. And I said to the guy right there, I said, when can I take that down? He said, whenever you want. Being a little sarcastic right now, I don't want to yet. But I got to go back 5 or 6 years ago when I called the city complaining about the trees that were laying over my house. And they come down and they cut down 3 of several. They said they were going to come back, and the guy's name was Camp, I think it was, that the city called, left a message on my machine that they were going to come and plant some trees. They haven't done that in 5 or 6 years.
Okay, but the issue before us...
That's so they can maintain... I live on the Chase River, in the flood zone that you people made into the flood zone. What was it before? It was a flood zone.
Okay, you know what we're dealing with here? We're dealing with construction completed without a permit, sir. That's
Pardon
all
me?
we want to hear about. The issue before us is that you completed construction without a permit. That's all we really need to deal with right now.
Really? Well, I'm telling you what happened. And I was told by down the annex down there, take it down when you want. That's what I was told.
Okay.
Now I get this notice that it's going to go down to Victoria, the land title. I really don't care.
Okay.
I really don't care, because I'm not selling the property anyway. But what I'm upset about is it's so quick. I've had the city, I had bylaw inspections on my property 3 or 4 times within, I put a 60-foot planter up here last 2 weeks ago. A planter for plants to make the place better looking. I had a bylaw enforcer come to my property within, I wasn't even finished building it. It's not a structure, it's a planter, for Christ's sake. And I had a building inspector there within a day, half a day. So the city's quick to come to me on my property to get things, I don't know, straight, but they're not quick to respond to get things proper. I'm choked over this.
Yeah, so you are. But
And
the point
I
is
think there
that,
might be, no, there's more besides that. Over the last several years, I've had the city come to my property quite often. There's the...
all we're dealing with, sir,
Pardon?
is...
I know
all
what
we're
you're dealing
is
with.
a
I understand what
construction
you're dealing with, but I want to give you the history of what's going on.
Well, we're not
here.
interested in hearing that, sir. We've
You're not
got all
interested
kinds
in
of
that. I know you're
delegations.
not.
And if you're not concerned, we can go ahead with the Section 57 if it doesn't bother you.
Pardon me?
I said we can go ahead with the Section 5. You're saying you're not concerned if the Section 57 goes on the table?
Well, I'm here because I'm concerned about that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But I don't know,
You didn't.
I want to make a point that obviously you just want to deal with that issue there.
Yeah, well, that's
and I
all
haven't
we're-
been
it's
given
on our
proper
agenda.
notice. Nobody come to me and see if, nothing's been done to it.
Okay.
The posts are not even cut off. Nothing's been done to it since I received a stop work order on it. So how can you resend this to there when nobody comes? The city doesn't even know what's been done there. They haven't been by to have a look at it. But I get this notice.
Okay, well, we've got a couple of questions from council for you. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Worship. Always compassionate in an emotional situation when we're talking about our prized possession, and that's our home, and we're trying to make things better for...
I apologize for my
No, I've asked many years for people not to apologize for their passion, but just the respectful component of that. And you know me well enough to know that I have that element in me too. Just a question to staff. I just have to ask the question: if the work isn't being taken, if it's not taking place, then how is it a illegal construction? If this work we went and said, stop work, you don't have a permit, you need a permit, and work was stopped, and work hasn't commenced, as I understand it. I could be incorrect. So if work hasn't commenced, how do we put a stop work order, or how do we put this 57 on it when it's not being worked on?
Sure.
Mr. Lindsay.
True, Worship, good question. From the perspective of the building inspector, would be that there be sufficient enough works that have been completed, that there should either be a building permit to legalize those works or a notice put on title to recognize they were done without. But there'd have to be some amount of works to be completed before the stop work order went on the property.
What?
There would have to be some amount of work done before a stop work order was placed on it, is what the gentleman said.
Yes, and then the stop work order was posted
I'm just
on
repeating
there.
what the staff said, that's
Pardon
so
me?
you could hear it.
Yeah. That's what he said.
There was a stop work order put on the,
There
on,
was
on the,
some
on the
work
structure.
there.
Yeah, there was
Yes.
work. I put the deck on there. I put railings, and they said it wouldn't meet code because the railings were horizontal. I put cedar railings on there, 6 inch, just 4 inch between them. But then I go around the city and I see down on the waterfront there, all the horizontal railings over the water, all the ways up to that monstrosity going up in the air. That's got horizontal railings on. I'm not arguing with that. I'm just saying, why would I have to be conforming to it when nobody else has to?
Okay.
If I-
Are you finished?
No.
But anyway, that's all argumentative stuff, Your Honor. I'm just upset because I get this today.
Okay.
And I can probably do it in a little more calmer emotions if I had a bit of time to put it together and put it in a statement.
When the inspector came to our house and put the stop work order on, the deck was basically built except for the roof and something on the bottom. And he said to us point blank, he said, when you get around to working on it and finishing it, get your, what do we need, a
Building
permit, come down, show us what you're gonna do, take the old one away and put up the new one. And we said, when do we have to do it? He said, there's no time limit on it.
Whenever you
We
want.
said, oh, okay, well, we have not had time to do it, so it's actually sat just as is. We haven't touched it.
This says it was completed, and it's saying it's far from completed. It wasn't touched since we got the start work order on it. So it's not completed.
So if I could just ask the delegation and ask staff, probably the same. I'll just ask you, do you have intentions to complete it?
Actually, we do, yeah.
So
Literally have not had time.
Sure, and that's fine. So when you do intend to finish it, you have to go down and get a permit.
I understand that.
Like you have
the
to.
other one's coming down. What's there now is coming down.
Well,
I'll take the
down.
designs down and get it done. I'll get it. I want to. The word is conform to the codes and all these things. I want to do that.
It'll save you money in the end, in the long run, if you do, and less aggravation.
I'm sure it
than
will.
if you don't. So I would strongly encourage you to connect with staff and say, listen, our intentions are within this period of time. Because when I hear you say you don't care, I know you care, and I know that you want to do the right thing. And so try your damnedest to do the right thing for your family and yourself, and conform. You said it, conform.
Oh, exactly. I have no problem with that.
We just did not realize there was a problem. We honestly thought.
Today is our first time
we
I hear
just
about
hadn't gotten around to touching it. So this shocked us today.
Okay, so we're going to deal with this in a second, but thanks.
Councilor Kip.
Yeah, if I can, the delegation, you have a couple of concerns. One is that the time of this notification, you just arrived at today, you didn't have time to prepare anything.
And be here tonight.
And your second one was, you say you don't care, but that's the whole idea, is you're not selling your house, so you really don't care if this.
That's what I don't care about. I'm not selling my house.
But if you had a 30-day period now with which to work to the city, work with them and get down and talk to them about what they need and get some drawings together, would that give you enough time?
No, he'd need 60 days.
45. I know Miles.
30 won't do it, I know him.
Spoken like a true wife.
I also understand he hasn't.
How about 32?
So you need some time to work with staff and that. Now, one other question if I can. The deck that's there, staff said to stop work on.
Yeah.
That's when you were tearing the deck apart?
No.
You'd already.
There was a concrete deck there, and it was a 5x4, and I put an 8x10 cedar deck on there.
It's sitting on the old deck.
It's sitting on the concrete. And so
It's 8x10 now, but it was 5x4.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
I enlarged it.
Thank you. That's
Councilor Brennan.
If anybody has any more questions for the delegation.
You're the
then-
last.
Hmm?
You're the
'Cause I
last.
just want to talk staff.
Okay.
I
No other
think
questions for the
they've
delegation
made
then?
their case quite clearly, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
I'm looking at this and I just can't find, it's just, I've got it. So it's just a section 57 you want to put on it. So, and how long does that take you to register that in Victoria and for that to show on title?
Your Worship, I would estimate about 2 weeks from the time we get council's direction till the notice actually would show up.
Okay. If we gave you an instruction to work with the owner and have one of these two things happen, that within 60 days the situation is rectified, and if not, then file Section 57. Would that satisfy the requirements here? Could we give you that kind of direction?
Absolutely, Your Worship. That would work for staff.
Okay, then I would make that motion that staff be instructed to work for the next 60 days, and at the end of that period, file a Section 57 if the work is not complete.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Yeah.
Just a clarification on that, the work to be completed, you mean the design, the permit issue, and the construction? Because the permit issue in itself could take 3 to 4 weeks or 2 weeks for that. So I would like to see that this is the process to apply for a permit is underway in that 60 days.
Okay.
Okay. Do you understand you got the motion for that one? Okay, and maybe to the delegation, is that going to work for you, sir? Okay.
So let me be clear then. So the instruction to staff is to have within the next 60 days the building permit in place. If not, then a Section 57.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? The motion carries.
His wife raised her hand too.
Thank you.
So he said that he's all-
Get him started now. Thank you. Okay, now we move into item J, the 2013 annual.
Your Worship, there's one more property and the motion has been on the floor.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for that. 205 King Road, expired permit, outstanding deficiencies. Anyone in attendance tonight? Mr. Clements, at your house. That wants to deal with 205 King Road, expired permit, outstanding deficiencies? Seeing none, someone would like to make the motion that moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Now we move into the 2013 annual financial statements. The purpose is to present the 2013 annual financial statements for acceptance by council. And we have a presentation. Ms. Nancy Addy McKay, partner, and audit, KPMG. And welcome.
Great, thank you. Good evening. I believe the financial statements are in your package, and really what I'm here to do is just to discuss how our audit went this year. So we have completed our audit, and we don't have any outstanding issues with management. We had full cooperation. And in our package, we noted a few things that needed to be resolved before we could issue our opinion, and one of them was receiving the legal letters back, which we did receive, and there was no issues for that. So pending your approval of the statements, and once we receive a representation letter back from management, which is dated today, then we'll be able to be in a position to issue our audit opinion, which will be a clean one, so there is no issues outstanding whatsoever. In the information package that was provided to you too, we also outlined a little bit of what our audit approach was. And when we did our audit, we took a look at what we do is we have a level of materiality, so that's sort of the sieve that we go through the financial statements at. We take a look at roughly 2% of expenses. That's the standard amount that we look at for municipalities. So that works out to about $3.4 million. And what that means is if we came across any differences that were greater than $170,000, we would come back to you and report those and include those in our package. So cumulatively, there weren't any differences that we found that were not booked in the financial statements that would make the statements materially misstated. As with any audit, we are required to spend time on certain areas, and one of the areas has to do with management override. So any concerns with transactions that are not fulsome and appropriately recorded, but we had no issues. We took a look at journal entries that were booked right around year end, because that's when we generally see any manipulation that would happen. We didn't find anything out of the ordinary, and we didn't find any biases by management throughout the year of any entries that were recorded. There were a few things that we itemized in our report that were a bit unusual, and one was that there was a new accounting standard that was implemented this year, and that has to do with government transfers. And there's more rigor around when revenue can be recognized from government transfers and when it needs to stay on the balance sheet and be matched with expenses that qualify. So with respect to gas taxes, when money is received related to gas taxes, it's to be spent on certain types of expenditures. So now that money has to be set aside until those expenditures are actually made. So management appropriately recorded that by making an adjustment to the surplus in the prior year. So by the end of the March 31, 2014 balance sheet is appropriately stated under the new guidance. So it's a little bit different this year than what you would normally see, and you wouldn't see that going forward. So it was accounted for appropriately when there's a new standard that comes into play. The other thing that we just wanted to report back on is the dam project. In our report previously, we highlighted the work that we did to make sure that there was an appropriate amount of an accrual sitting on the balance sheet related to the dam project. So right now, management's recorded sort of a minimum amount that would be required to remediate the dams to meet the environmental, or so the regulatory standards. And that has not been adjusted this year. I know that there's potentially changing plans on what will happen to the dams, but the minimum amount that needs to be recorded in the statements and it is appropriately done so. So there's been no change to that accrual from year to year, but we believe that that's an appropriate treatment. Other than that, I can just report that all of the estimates that were made by management were appropriate and used the right amount of data to support those numbers. And again, that we didn't see any bias either way. In the report, we've also included our independence letter. So that's just to confirm that we were independent throughout the time that we conducted the audit. That's a requirement of our standards. We've also included a management letter, which is when we, in terms of doing our audit, if we come across areas where we think the controls could be strengthened, we include those and report those back to you. So we had one new point this year, and that was just to make sure that the policies and procedures that are followed by the city with respect to expenses are also followed by the NEDC. And then we also reported back in prior years we had identified the cash controls in the Parks and Rec department could perhaps be strengthened, and that's an ongoing project. So we just continually report back on everything until it's fully resolved. That's for the highlight of the audit. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, we have some. I'm just kind of curious. You said to be strengthened from Parks, Recreation, and Environment. Now, what each? Could you just, just off the top of your head, what type of things are you thinking of?
Making sure that the safe where cash is being kept is closed in between transactions. So sometimes it was being left open for a longer period of time than what we would expect to see. And actually the handling of cash, making sure that there's a little more rigor around how that happens during the day. We didn't find anything inappropriate, but as we come across things where we can see that there could be a higher standard that followed, we like to make those recommendations.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Worship. Thank goodness there's no more box office reconciliations for GST calculations. I would just like to ask you a couple of questions. The minimum amount that you made reference to, what for the dams? What is that minimum amount?
That would be the cost if the least expensive way of meeting the regulations would be to remove the dams. And the amount is shown in where? It is in the payables, and it's 3.1 million. Thanks. Thank you. And second question is funds held in reserves, $119 million. I'm not sure who to direct the question to, but our return on that number, and I know that the reserves are, I don't know, Your Worship, if anybody else wants to ask any questions.
You're the only one so far.
Oh, okay. So I don't have any more questions for you, thank you.
Okay.
But perhaps I should ask Mr. Clemens then. The $119 million is invested.
That's correct, Your Worship.
And those investments are a better return than paying down some of our debt.
Your Worship, we don't have the option to pay down debt every year. We only have the option every 10 years when it becomes due.
And when is that?
I'd have to look at the next payment, but it's not for a few years yet.
So on the monies then that we, with your indulgence, Your Worship, so with the money, 119 million is a few bucks, and I'm assuming that we're getting the absolute best rate of return on interest, and I'm sure that this is a government thing and all whatever, but can you tell me on 120 million, roughly, what we're bringing in?
Your Worship, we're very restricted in what we can invest money in. We can only invest money in certain kinds of agencies which are very conservative and have a very low return. Our average return is around 2%.
And would that be consistent across all municipalities or cities that have over $100 million in the 2% range?
I would be very surprised if another municipality was earning a higher interest rate than we are. We're fairly active in going out and searching out investments that are available to us and working through the MFA in going out for quotes to get investments. It's just very difficult given our restrictions, which I think are totally appropriate for a municipality, by the way, that we be restricted to investing in very safe, secure investments.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. I see no further questions at this point from council. So what we'll do now, the staff recommendation that a motion that council accept the 2013 annual financial statements for the City of Nanaimo, and that has been moved. And so if somebody would like to move that, Councillor Anderson. Second by Councillor Patchy. I see no further discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We now move into the 2014 financial plan and tax rates bylaw, and this is to be introduced by Mr. Brian Clements, Director of Finance. Mr. Clements.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll try to get through this quickly because I've heard there's a very long presentation coming later on this evening.
Well, there's no pressure for you to do so, of course.
So this is, Council is very familiar with the budget this year, I would say more so than any past year, having spent more than 4 months grinding through all the details of it. What this presentation seeks to do is to provide some context for the public and for Council and how it fits overall as part of a financial plan. A copy of this presentation will be placed on the website after tonight's presentation, so people will be able to look at it, and of course they can follow this on the city's website and a rebroadcast. So what we're going to talk about tonight is, I'll give a very quick overview of the process, the status of the tax increase, some comments about asset management and some other major issues, a little bit about what's in the budget, and we'll wrap up by talking about taxation. So the process that was followed this year was very different than we'd done in previous years. And I would say that what we did was a focus on a very detailed service level review. So we did a service level review for every function of the city. That included detailed discussion of operating and maintenance costs. It included a review of non-recurring costs, such as projects and capital. And it includes things like service level adjustments for new and enhanced services, largely related to staffing and protective services. So collectively, those last two items are what we were calling decision packages. So then we conducted a priority setting exercise for all the non-reoccurring expenditures, all the decision packages. We did it first of all at the department level, then we did it over the entire organization, and that was presented to Council, who then determined which projects would be included in the 5-year capital plan. So what that resulted in at the end of the exercise was a 2.5% property tax increase for the City of Nanaimo's portion of the taxes. Of that, 1% is for asset management, and the other 1.5% is for all other expenses. The increases are relatively stable for the next 3 years. There's a larger bump in 2017, but I'm fairly confident over the next 3 years that as Council will move that bump out or smooth it out over the coming years. You'll notice that in 2018 there is no increase for asset management. Our existing plan is to complete it over a 5-year period, and there would be no increase in 2018 specific to asset management. We will, of course, continue to review those details and update that over time. So that was taxes. On the user rate side, we have in water a 5% increase for water supply, and a 2.5% increase that's related to asset management for a 7.5% increase in water, and Council has already adopted the bylaws for water and sewer this year. Sewer had a 5% increase, which is specific to asset management. Garbage is a bit more complicated because our garbage fee is a combination of garbage and recycling. So at the beginning of the year, we had a bit of an increase to account for increased costs in the curbside collection program. But as of tonight, we will be introducing bylaws to take effect June 1st that will reduce the recycling fee component of the garbage fee. And we would expect in December to introduce further bylaws to get the entire impact of the $35 reduction that Ms. Davis was talking about earlier this evening. One of the things that Council may be interested in is that we are currently doing a rate comparison with our comparable municipalities on Vancouver Island and comparable municipalities throughout BC to compare our user fees. First indication is that they're quite a bit lower than most other municipalities. We're doing a little testing to make sure that we're comparing apples to apples, because some municipalities have parcel taxes, some municipalities have user fees, some collect in different ways. So we just wanted to make sure we've got it right, but we hope to get that to you in the next few weeks. The effect on our sort of fictitious typical home, which has an assessment of $350,000 in 2014, is that it would have an increase of about $50.70 for the city and Vancouver Island Regional Library portion of the taxes only. We don't have all the other agencies yet, so I can't tell you exactly what it will be for all school, hospital, regional district, etc. When you add in the user fees, that works out to an increase for this home of $67.37, which is about a 2.6% increase over the previous year. So what are the items that are causing an increase in 2014? This is a question I always find really difficult to answer because we have a budget that's almost $200 million. There's obviously lots of things going on. There are things going up, there are things going down, there are revenues going up and down. So it's hard to pinpoint a few things. But we can talk about specifically the increase for asset management. So the 1% increase for asset management is slightly over $900,000. The Vancouver Regional Library requisition is up $277,000, which is about 8% over the previous year. We have an election in 2014, which we don't have every year. We have, when you look at all of those decision packages we dealt with, we have some general revenue funding for projects of about $1.6 million. That's higher than the same level of previous years. There were only 2 additional staff hired at police services, and we put them in at half a year because at this point we were pretty clear that they weren't going to be in place for the whole year. Now this is offset by a reduction in management staff equal to about $900,000 and some increased revenues from the casino and from property revenues. We increased our budget for casino revenues by $200,000 to match what we actually received in 2013. So we're being hopeful that what we saw last year is what we'll continue to get in the future. So as I've said before, the focus of this year's budget is the maintenance of existing assets. So I thought it was pretty important to have a bit more discussion about asset management specifically than we have done previously. Now this is a fairly complicated slide, but what it does is it breaks down, remember that list of 400 plus decision packages plus all the new or the early approval projects. This breaks down those projects into what categories they fell in. And you may remember that each of them had a category associated with them, whether it was asset management or new or a service level increase, which generally means more staffing, or an upgrade, which is something like a bit of an asset management but at slightly higher capacity. So if you look at 2014 is not a typical year. We still have a very high percentage of new, and that's related to the water treatment plant, which is being finished this year. 2015 is a more typical year, and you can see that about 60% of those decision packages, of those non-recurring expenses, was related to asset management, so renewal of existing assets. And the bottom line tells you how many dollars that is from our general revenue, so taxes and related costs was about $9 million in 2014. So a significant expenditure of city revenues are going towards asset management. A graph 2015, just so you could have an idea of what that looked like. And as I said, is a more typical year. In 2015, we're spending $20 million in total, not just general revenue. This is all sources, so this would include general revenue as well as reserves. And by far the majority of our budget is being spent on asset management. Now, the new stuff is largely funded through development cost charges. We're not putting very much general revenue into new expenditures. So when you talk about asset management in the context of the general fund, we're setting aside 1% each year. In addition to what we're spending in the budget, we're also raising 1% and setting it aside, putting it in a reserve. So it's about an additional $900,000 a year. And this builds reserves for transportation issues, for storm drainage, for civic facilities, including all departments, whether it's Parks Rec, City Hall, Public Works, for parks amenities such as sports fields, playgrounds, and trails, and for major technology like telephones, servers, so major chunks. Within the context of the 5-year plan that we're asking Council to adopt, it collects $18 million. Within the sanitary sewer fund, and maybe one of the things that's not clear to anybody watching this is that within sanitary sewer and water, we fund everything within those funds. So there's no separate taxes for sanitary sewer. It's all raised through user fees. There's no taxation for water from the city. It's all raised from user fees. So it includes an increase over approximately 10 years. Prior to us implementing the 5% increase in 2013, there had not been an increase in sanitary sewer fees since 1998. There had in fact been 2 decreases during that period of time. Now this will collect about $5.6 million between 2014 and 2018. The water rates, so there's as I said, 2.5% specifically for asset management, in addition to the 5%, which is about building revenues for water supply. So the asset management portion builds reserves for renewing our dams, pump stations, reservoirs, and water mains. And it collects about $7 million for asset management only during that period. Some of the other major issues for Council's consideration is, as we talked about, water supply continues to be a big emphasis in the city's budget. And over the next decade, expenditures will continue to increase for water supply. In 2015, the water treatment plant will begin operations, and it'll have an annual operating cost of about $1.2 million. And we're looking for increased water supply sources, so that's going to have an impact over the next decade as we source out where we're going to get additional water. All of this is funded through a combination of borrowing, grants, reserves, development cost charges, and increased rates. We're also doing other initiatives such as rate comparisons and improving conservation and awareness. So we're actually looking at doing a project this year to look at our water rate structure and our sewer rate structure to see if it can be improved to make it either simpler or have more incentive for conservation. As far as the Colliery dams go, we set aside $2.5 million in 2013 from the 2012 surplus. The majority of that has been spent. There is no specific funding in 2014 to 2018 to address capital improvements that may be required. Council has received a report previously on the funding options for Colliery Dam. We'll review that report when there's cost estimates. Wellcox Yard development is another major initiative over the next 5-year plan. There is some money in the budget right now for it. There's $400,000 for remediating the pallet area and another $400,000 for the C-span area. Those are both funded from reserves. There is $6 million, I believe it's in 2016, to potentially replace the Wellcox trestle. That would be proposed to be done from borrowing, which would require approval. But we are also considering alternate access issues. So at this point, we're not sure exactly, we don't have an exact project to fund. I think that the Wellcox Yard and the work we're doing there is a good candidate for grant funding. The federal government has money set aside for brownfield renewals. A lot of the work that we're doing here has good economic development benefits and intermodal connections. So I think that there's some good potential for us to get some money from one of the senior governments or from some other agency for this particular project, and we're working on doing that right now. A significant expense of the city is the RCMP contract. The current authorized strength is 140 members. Just as a reminder, we pay 90%, the municipal taxpayers pay 90%, and the federal taxpayers pay 10% of that. We currently budget for 96% of the estimated cost of the RCMP contract, and that accounts for the fact that it's difficult for them to stay staffed at 100% just due to turnovers. And the current contract for the budget for the 2014 contract is $20.7 million. It's our largest single expense. The RCMP developed a staffing plan several years ago. It was based on a police resourcing study that was intended to add 24 general duty members and 10 support staff over 5 years, so between 2010 and 2014, and this was to meet a 2008 staffing target, so this was based on their study in 2008. Of that plan, we still have not hired 9 RCMP and 4 support staff. Within the 2014 to 2018 financial plan, we would add 17 RCMP members and 4 municipal employees. So this plan will add all the outstanding members and more. The only one that's in 2014 is the support staff, is 1 support staff member, so a municipal employee. By 2018, the annual cost of these 21 additional employees would be about $2.8 million. So it's a fairly expensive proposition. This is a fairly complicated grid that shows which members are added in which year. I don't propose to go over it, but it will be available on the website for anybody who wants to have a look at it. Now, we also have been planning for several years an upgrade to the police station. So it's now targeted for 2018 and budgeted at $6.6 million, including design. The annual debt payments on that $6.6 million would be about $618,000 at current interest rates. There's a study budgeted for in 2016 that would determine the space requirements so that we can get the detailed design done. The other major issue that Council discussed during our budget deliberations was the construction of the Fire Station number 6 in Hammond Bay. So it's currently within the budget. Construction starting in 2015, budgeted at $2.4 million. Again, the proposal is that we would borrow the money for this, that would be paid back over 20 years at an annual debt payments of $234,000. Daytime staffing of 10 firefighters would begin in June of 2016, full-time 24/7 staffing in June of 2018. The annual cost to operate a fire station of this size when it's fully staffed is about $2 million annually. Some of the major capital projects that are in the budget, I'm not going to go through these slides again. They're available on the website for anybody who wants to spend some time doing it. But here's some of the major projects over the next 5 years, and these projects all essentially have a combined component. So they would combine water, sewer, and potentially storm drainage and roads as well as part of the project. And some are funded from DCCs as new, and some are renewal projects. Maybe the one that's worth pointing out is the bottom one. So the just straight road renewal budget is $8.5 million over the term of this financial plan. In sewer, there's similar expenditures. We have a number of DCC projects over the next 5 years, and we have a fairly large budget for doing sewer infrastructure renewal as well. So again, emphasis on renewal of existing assets. And where we're not renewing existing assets, the funding generally comes from development cost charges. So the big project still is the completion of the water treatment plant by the end of, well, it'll be operational in 2015. So the number of other projects in water, both in water supply and in water distribution. And we're going to work to put some of this information up on the website for people to look at. We already have copies of our operating budget and capital budgets there, if anybody's really interested in that level of detail. Taxation. So the important equation to remember in taxation is assessment times tax rate equals property taxes. And to be reminded that the city has no control over people's assessments. That's done through BC Assessment. And we only have control over some of the tax rates, which equal to about roughly 60% of the local property tax bill. Now, properties come in 9 different classes. We spend a lot of time talking about residential and business and other because they are the largest portions, and you'll see some stats later on as to how they broke down. There are actually 9 different property classes. The other interesting thing about this for people is that residential is one single class. It does not matter whether it is a vacant piece of land, a strata, an apartment building, or a single-family dwelling, they all have the same tax rate. What varies is the assessed value. In some cases, the method of how the property is assessed. So who sets all of those tax rates? Well, we set some portion of it. I say the school district is actually the province that sets the rate on behalf of the school district. The school district really doesn't have much control over their own tax rate. And from the regional district and the regional hospital district and the regional library, we get a requisition. They tell us how much money they're requisitioning, and in exchange for that, we set a tax rate and we collect it on their behalf. And the Municipal Finance Authority and BC Assessment are very small portions of the tax bill, but they provide us with rates as well. Here's a graph that shows what the tax increases have been over the past 10 years. So these are the blended tax increases. In years where there's been a difference between the classes, we've used the average rate. So one of the questions people always ask me right now is, so how much are my taxes going up? And the answer is it's difficult for me to tell each individual that, but we have a property tax estimator on the city's website. It's one of the revolving features on the front page, or you can go in through the residence property tax tabs on the website. It includes some assumptions, so where we don't know how much the taxes are going up, like the school district, we've just put in a number so that we can at least give people an estimate. But we update them as soon as we get new information. So in order to be applicable to as many properties as possible, it doesn't take into account the homeowner grant or special levies, so people would need to add those things, and the website explains all of this. So after how much are my taxes going up, the next question we usually get is, how do our taxes compare to everybody else's? So the province of BC collects this information from all municipalities and posts it on their website. It gives the average assessment for a single-family house in each of these communities. It tells you what the municipal taxes would be on those houses. There's another column which I haven't shown, which is the other taxes like school, hospital, regional district, and it shows how much the user fees are on that house. And then it totals it for all agencies, all user fees. So that's a fairly good estimate of what it would cost for an average assessed property in each of those communities. Where I've said average with the asterisk on it, that's the average of the 12 municipalities closest in size to Nanaimo. And the reason that the average is higher than all of the ones you see there is that there's a couple of municipalities that tend to bring up the average. That includes North Van District, New Westminster, and Victoria. So they're the ones that are higher than these municipalities. As you can see, the three that we've chosen that are similar in size are fairly similar in tax levels as well. And commercial tax rates, we don't fare as well when compared to other municipalities. It's difficult to assess, do comparisons for commercial property taxes because you don't have the same sort of average house and market values. It's hard to find comparable properties. I actually spent some time one year. I tried to find a McDonald's in every one of the same size communities, and it's amazing how few businesses actually own standalone property where they're the only business on their own property and they're a comparable size. So it was very difficult to find comparable properties. So if we've posted the rates, we acknowledge that right now the city is higher than our average comparisons. On the other hand, with industrial tax rates, we're now basically the same, or our industrial tax rates are the same as our commercial tax rates. Over the past 5 years, we've reduced them considerably. The little arrows there indicate what happened to those rates within those municipalities. Generally, it didn't move very much, other than Campbell Rivers came down considerably. The others changed only slightly compared to previous years. But we have the lowest tax rates of these municipalities, and they were chosen because at the time we started doing this, they all had mills that were sort of comparable to the city of Nanaimo. So in 2013, we were at 40%, so 60% of all cities who had industrial taxation had a higher rate than we did, and we were about the average of all municipalities. So that includes district municipalities, villages, and other types of local governments. This is a couple of charts that I always find really interesting, because what this shows you is within those close comparators that we have, Kelowna, Kamloops, Prince George, Victoria, where we get our assessment from. So the lowest portion of the bar, the darker blue for those who are seeing it in not such great color, That is residential assessment. So that's what it tells you, for example, in Kamloops, is they have about $10 billion in residential assessment. The other bar that's distinguishable there is commercial assessment. So that's the second largest property class. What you probably can't see very well are the two very thin red lines on Kamloops and Prince George, which are major industry, and the city of Nanaimo. They barely show up. So essentially the amount of assessment that we have for those categories is very low. The next chart is the same municipalities, but now it shows where the tax levy comes in. So the first one said who has the assessed values. This one tells us where are we getting our money from. So you can see how this bar changes considerably. And for example, in Victoria, they get a considerable amount of their taxation from the commercial assessment within their boundaries. You also see Prince George and Kamloops getting large amounts of taxation from major industry. But the interesting thing, just toggling back and forth, is you can see how even though they have a large disparity in their tax base, when you look at how much money they collect, they're relatively similar, between $80 and $100 million in property taxes. This shows the comparison between assessments and taxes just for the city of Nanaimo. So what this tells us is that even though 84% of our assessment base is residential, they only pay 67.5% of the taxes. Commercial, business, and other pay 28% of the taxes, even though they're about 14% of the assessment. Now, there's a bit of apples and oranges going on there because they're assessed on different methods. Industry is assessed based on a statutory scheme that the BC Assessments developed. Businesses pay based on, to a certain extent, the value of their business, which may or may not represent the market value of the property. And whereas residential should be based on something close to the market value of the property. The major taxpayers in 2013 didn't change very much from the previous year. It's largely the large malls in the community, along with Nanaimo Forest Products and BC Ferries. So the other concept that's worth talking about is growth, or which we also talk about as being new construction. So when does because there's a bit of misunderstanding sometimes by some people who think that just because assessed values go up, our taxes go up. The city and all agencies only really collect new revenue when there's new assessments, so new inventory. And this inventory comes through subdivision or through new construction. So when new things are built or when value is added by taking a $1 million property and dividing it into 10 properties, each of which is worth $200,000 or something like that. So general increases in market value don't generate more tax dollars, but what they do result in is them being distributed differently throughout the community. So when you see an increase in assessment in one area of town, that will mean that potentially taxes are being shifted to another area of town as we shift the tax rates to account for that. New revenue from growth is unpredictable. We try to do our best to use our building permit revenue to get a good guess on it. So we can see some history over the last 4 years. 2013 was a remarkable year because we had some major commercial development in that year. We've been conservative in future years of the plan. As we get more information, we continue to update these. We'll update the next round of budgets. So that's my presentation, Your Worship. We are posting more information on the website. We're planning that next Monday night, which is a committee of the whole meeting, that we'd have some time set aside in the agenda for delegations on the budget to council. And I think that's all I have to say in my introduction to the budget bylaws. Oh, maybe the other thing that's worth saying is that budget bylaws are on the agenda tonight. They must be adopted by May the 15th. We only have one council meeting between now and May the 15th. If we need more, we will schedule more.
Well, thank you, Mr. Clements. And, a big thank you to you and your staff, which are largely here tonight, too, because it was a huge amount of work this year, far more than previous years. And I think to you and the other senior staff in arranging a number of meetings and providing the opportunity for us to go through a huge amount of material. And I think it was well worth the effort. I think we all gained a great deal of background knowledge from it, and I thank you for that too. So we maybe should start, before we start debating this, and get a motion that Council receives for information the report pertaining to financial plan bylaw 2014 number 7197 and property tax rates bylaw 2014 number 7194.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. And now in discussion, Councillor Pachi.
Just a quick question to Mr. Clements, if I may. Explain to me again why there is nothing set aside for asset management in 2018, and then what happens in 2019?
Based on the projections that we made as part of the work that we did in 2012 and 2013, we believed that we would build enough money up over the 5-year period that we would be able to handle the spikes that are coming down the path in future years, so that we wouldn't need to have an incremental increase. But remember, we've added 1% in each of 5 years. So by 2018, by the end of 2017, 5% of our property tax levy will be specifically for asset management, only, and that's only for the general fund. That doesn't include sanitary sewer or water.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Mr. Clemens. Just on page 101, outstanding debt and per capita debt. From 2012, 379 per capita to 2013, 515. $136 differential, or about 40%. Can you explain to me what represents that?
That was the first borrowing for the water treatment plant. So we're borrowing $22.5 million, I believe, over 2 years, and that was the first borrowing.
That was the first intake, or whatever. So, and I see that we have about another 80 million for the water treatment plant and water distribution and so on and so forth.
Well, Your Worship, the city borrowed another $9 million this year to complete the borrowing for the water treatment plant. One of the reasons we've been increasing water rates over the past few years is to service that borrowing, is to increase the amount of money that we're bringing in as revenue so that we can service the borrowing costs associated with the water treatment plant.
Thank you. And 24, could you, in one of your slides there was school board, regional district. Could you please tell me what our annual contribution of the city of Nanaimo is to the regional district of Nanaimo? They've got about $140 million budget, or I guess what we do, on top of our $190 million budget that we service a portion of inside our $190+ million budget. What's that amount?
So our contributions to the school board are on top.
To the regional
district.
district.
The regional district are on top of our, because what happens with that is that we collect the money from the city's citizens of Nanaimo. We pay it over to the regional district, but it's not formally part of the city's budget other than as a flow through. We collect it and we pay it over. And I'm sorry, I don't remember what our total requisitions are for the regional district. Maybe somebody from behind me has that information who can pass it up to me.
Is there a ballpark? Like, could you just throw a ballpark at me?
I'd be guessing, and I don't like to guess. But someone will look that up, and we should have it free in a few minutes.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess there's no other questions now, so we'll just see if we can wait for that update then. No pressure. Sorry?
Your Worship, we have a number. It's about $52 million.
101. 53 million? Councillor Benson?
Sorry?
It's
53 million?
About 52 million. So.
52.
Yeah.
Say again, 52 million.
On top of our...
That's correct.
So our budget really is 240 million.
Well, I think it's important in this particular case to distinguish who we are. I mean, this council also sits as board members, and their budget is much bigger than just the $52 million because it includes all of the regional district. But yes, the citizens of the taxpayers within the city boundaries would have to pay that money, as well as school, hospital, and yeah.
Okay, so the motion. Oh, I've lost my place here. The motion that council received for information, the report is there, and it's moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Kipps opposed to, we're just receiving the information. Okay, that's fine. the motion now that financial plan bylaw 2014, number 7197, passed first reading. Someone like to move that?
So moved, Your Worship.
Moved. Second. Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Kipp, Councillor Beswick, and Councillor McKay opposed. Balance council in favor. The motion passes. Motion that the financial plan pass the second reading.
So moved, Your Worship.
Second. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? We have Councillor McKay, Councillor Kipp, Councillor Beswick opposed. Balance council in favor. The motion passes. And finally, that the financial plan bylaw 2014 number 797 pass third reading.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor McKay, Councillor Beswick, Councillor Councillor Kipp. The balance of council in favor. The motion passes. Now the tax rates bylaw 2014 number 7197 to establish tax rates for 2014. The motion that tax rates bylaw 2014 number 7194 passed first reading. Moved. Second. All those in favor? Opposed? We have Councillor Kipp, Councillor Beswick, and Councillor McKay opposed. Balance council in favor. The motion passes. And the motion that tax rates bylaw 2014 number 7194 pass second reading. Moved. Seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Opposed. Councillor Kipp, Councillor Beswick, and Councillor McKay. Balance council in favor. The motion passes. And finally, the motion that the tax rates bylaw 2014 number 7194 pass third reading. Moved. Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Beswick, Councillor Kipp, and Councillor McKay. Now we move into the amendment to rates and changes, charges rather, municipal solid waste collection bylaw, purpose to provide background to the proposed amendments to the garbage fees. And the staff recommendation, a motion that council receive for information the report pertaining to the Municipal Solid Waste Collection Amendment Bylaw 2014 number 7128.04. So moved and second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. And now there's the attended bylaws. Motion that Municipal Solid Waste Collection Amendment Bylaw 2014 number 7128.04 to amend Schedule A related to fees and charges in relation to the use of waste disposal and cycling services passed first reading.
So moved.
Moved. Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And second one, that motion that Municipal Solid Waste Collection Amendment Bylaw 2014 number 7128.04 pass second reading.
Moved.
Moved. Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And finally, motion that Municipal Solid Waste Collection Amendment Bylaw 2014 number 7128.04 pass third reading.
Moved.
Moved. And second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And now we've dealt with M, and so we go down to Strategic Plan Implementation Progress. Purpose is to provide council with information on the progress of implementing the corporate strategic plan. And the staff recommendation is a motion that council receive for information the report pertaining to the strategic plan implementation process. And before we do that, I just want to say it's a pretty comprehensive document. It starts on page 185, and there's some 27 different separate items for consideration. And so I think it's very comprehensive. And again, I'd like to thank staff for their involvement on this one. Would someone like to move that? Move in second. Discussion, Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff on page 189 of the staff report under number 6, waterfront enhancement. It says 6A, create a waterfront interdepartmental staff team mandated to build partnerships and to identify and act on opportunities to create an uninterrupted walkway, trail, and other priority outcomes. And it says that it's on target. And it says the next steps, committee to report back to council in March 2014, staff to bring cost estimates back to council. And it's, if I'm correct, April 2014, is it not?
Your Worship, the South Downtown Waterfront Committee did report to council initially, and they're to report back, and that's, I believe, what Councillor Anderson's referring to, is that we haven't reported back yet. We're expecting to do that in May.
No, that's not what I'm talking about. It says right under 6A, create a waterfront interdepartmental team, and it talks about identifying and acting on opportunities to create an uninterrupted waterfront trail and other priority outcomes. And so I was wondering where that is, because it says that it's on target, and I think we've passed March 2014. So I was wondering when that report would come to council.
Your Worship, the waterfront interdepartmental staff team has not been established yet. We've been focusing primarily on the South Waterfront Plan area right now. When this strategy was established, there was no Wilcox purchase at that point in time. We weren't dealing with the South Waterfront Plan at that time. All the staff focus at this point has been on the South Waterfront Plan. And the progress and next steps has been focused primarily on that issue and not on the balance of the waterfront walkway that you're referring to.
Okay, so that means that the symbol that's there actually should be a delayed symbol then, is that correct? Because it's not on target, in my opinion.
Your Worship, I put that as on target based on the significant work that has been done on the South Downtown Waterfront Plan.
Okay, because it says in the next steps to bring cost estimates back to council, and so I would assume that this is saying that a report would have been brought to us in March of 2014, and so it's now April. I haven't seen a report, and so that was what my question was. Not to say that there hasn't been valuable work done, but just curious as to when this might actually be coming forward to council.
I'm not city manager. Acting city manager may know. I know it was expected in March, but.
Your Worship, regarding the South Waterfront Committee, they'll be coming back to council probably the end of May. I don't anticipate that we're going to have any financial estimates at that point in time.
Councillor Patchy might have a timeline.
No,
You don't.
just to say that, we agreed that Dr. Whitty, the chair of the committee, would come back to council after he had addressed the regional district, which I believe he's done, the Port Authority, which he's done, and it's a question for him having a date with Shunamo First Nation, after which he'll come back. And that date has still not been set, as far as I know.
The date has tentatively been set with Snuneymuxw.
Okay. Which is when?
I believe it's May 6th, but it's early May.
So it's happening. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, then can I just have clarification that this specific line is talking only about the South Waterfront Initiative then? It's not talking about what's under the strategy slash initiative then?
Your Worship, that's correct. The strategy is a much broader strategy that we have not commenced. We've been focusing on one component of that strategy.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Worship. Just 6B, C, D, and E, they're all interrelated. But in the progress category for updated Maffeo Sutton Park Improvement Plan, there's nothing to suggest other than that there's a report to be presented in the fall. So is there progress being made on that report, or is there any information on that?
Maritan, in answer to Councillor Bestwick's question there, our parks planner has been working on that project. We had done some work over the last couple of years, but it has to be pulled together and then get to Parks Rec Commission and then to council. So there is more work to be done, but we are in process.
Okay, because one of the topics of concern greater than 2 years ago was probably enhanced washroom facilities and food and vending. So I will assume that will probably be in what's coming back to the commission sometime in the fall with something else. I'm hoping, because if it's only that, and we're waiting 2+ years to bring that back, that would be a considerably lengthy period of time to come back with something, in my humblest of opinions, to upgrade the washrooms and the vending. It's not a criticism of anybody, but it's a long time.
Do you want to make a comment here?
Your Worship, that plan has come before the Parks Committee and Commission as well, and will be coming forward to Council, I would think, before the end of the summer.
Oh, okay, so that's different than what I just heard. Thank you. So I look forward to seeing that, so we can replace fall with summer on the updated Maffeo-Sutton Park Improvement Plan. And then I just wanted to ask a question on the Departure Bay to the Kinhut, or Departure Bay Kinhut to Hammond Bay Road. Continue to work on obtaining required approvals for project work. Is that with the feds? Is that because it's water, or is that us? Because we're asking ourselves for required approvals for the project work.
Mayor Rattan, the approvals are with First Nations and also with the province, because we don't own that property. It's actually provincial road right-of-way. So that's the two agencies we need to work with.
On the walkway?
Yes. That's where it's sloped there, and we're trying to adjust the slope.
And sorry, but is there some objection to fixing the slope?
Just that we need to work through the approvals.
Thank you.
Okay. So the motion is, there's a motion on the floor now, and moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So we're going to move into community services. Unauthorized construction at 960 Woodpecker Lane and 6221 Groveland Drive. It's requested that council hear anyone wishing to speak with respect to unauthorized construction at the properties listed below. And the staff recommendation motion that council pursuant to section 7.2 and 7.3 of the community charter order the owners of the following properties to remove the unauthorized construction or bring the properties into compliance within 30 days. And the first is 960 Woodpecker Lane, unauthorized stairs. Anyone in attendance who would like to speak to matters related to 960 Woodpecker Lane? The second property is 6221 Groveland Drive, unauthorized suites in a single-family dwelling. Anyone in attendance tonight that would like to speak to matters related to 6221 Groveland Drive? Seeing none, if somebody would like to move the recommendation? Move and second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving into bylaws with no accompanying report. 10A, motion that building amendment bylaw 2014 number 5693.05 to make changes to monetary thresholds and general housekeeping amendments be adopted.
So moved, Your Worship.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And B, motion that the Development Services Department fees and charges amendment bylaw 2014 number 7016.05 to permit the recovery of certain land title and survey authority fees be adopted.
So moved.
Move second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. The bylaw status sheet, we're going into correspondence not related to a report to council. There's a letter from Prime Minister Stephen Harper requesting that Council mark the end of Canada's military mission in Afghanistan with a National Day of Honour on May the 9th by observing a concurrent moment of silence and participating in any community event staged at the Royal Canadian Legion branches, the local military facilities, or the schools. There isn't a set time. It's not like the 11th hour, the 11th day, and so on. So we're not sure, but I guess the intent is simply during that particular day, May the 9th, that a moment of silence be reserved, be allowed for that. Is there a seconder? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. There's any notices of motion? Any other business? We move into question period number 15.
My name is Fred Taylor, and I've listened to the tax rates times an average house, I think, was $350,000 in our area. Does that account for a loss in the total assessment values in this community of $124 million? Like there's your 97.9% of this for 2014 from 2013 for the same apples. Or exactly the same properties.
Your Worship.
Without any new properties added into it. You are 97.9%, so that to make up that 124 million, wouldn't it push my tax rate up higher to get the same dollars back?
Your Worship, if ignoring growth, if our assessed value, if our total assessments in the municipality go down, the tax rate goes up. We look at our overall tax revenue that we need to generate, and we effectively divide that by the assessments to come up with a tax rate every year.
I believe I understand that. But what I'm trying to say, for your residential, you're down quite a bit, $124 million. And what makes up for that in the tax rate, putting aside any new assessment roll? Because you've got less assessment total from last year to this year for the same properties, exactly the same. Don't add any new properties or construction. Exactly the same. Yes. So therefore, you've got to raise your tax rate up to get even the same dollars as last year.
Correct.
So is that 2.5 making up for this $124 million loss from last year?
No, the 2.5% applies to the tax revenue, the total
Yes.
tax revenue. And then that's apportioned out to each class, each assessment class. So the residential class, if the assessments went down, the tax rates went up.
Yes.
Before the 2.5% increase is applied.
So there's some part of that 2.5 is to make up for the...
No. No, it is not. No, the 2.5% is applied to the tax revenue. It's irrelevant what happens with the assessments. So if we, I'll try and explain this. If everything remained absolutely homogeneous from year to year, the tax rate would never increase. If the assessment goes down, there's no growth, there's no tax increase. If the assessment goes down in residential assessments, the tax rate will go up. So
that's happened this year.
That's correct. And then if we say, okay, we need $100 in revenue, of tax revenue, and then our assessments go down, we still want to collect $100 in revenue.
Yes.
But then in this year we're saying...
percentage, you're telling me 2.5
No, hang on, let me finish. Then we say we're going to collect $102.50. So we increase the tax revenue and we apply that over the reduced assessed value.
So confused.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Moved and seconded, we stand adjourned. Thank you very much.